Testing. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Great, thanks.
And I will begin by indicating that and acknowledging that we're gathered in various places across the regional district now, but in the territories of,
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we are not live streaming as yet.
okay,
I will let you know.
Your microphone is lifted from your earphones. Does that make any difference? Or you have another microphone?
well, were you able to hear me?
Yeah, but better now.
Well, yeah, and then I get accused of snorting into the microphone if I keep it here.
Mr. Chair, we are live
Yes,
streaming.
that's a perfect way to start. I'll do my best. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Just prior to getting underway, I would just note that we're in various places across the territories of the Coast Salish, and I think we got one of us in territory of the Nachalna speaking people, and I like to recognize that at the beginning of each meeting. Also note today that there are 8 directors in attendance, not 9, so that's an even number. So we will have to be diligent in our vote counts. Alternate Director Haim is absent today, and being he's the alternate director and doesn't have an alternate, his seat sits empty today. With that, I would call the meeting to order for the regular Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, October 21st. And the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda, but just prior to us moving adoption of the agenda, all of you will have received 2 supplementary items. One is an item in regards to R1 from the at the time Minister of Agriculture for the provincial government. And R2 is a number of submissions in regards to the other supplemental items are in regards to R2, a number of submissions in regards to the Fairbanks Road application. We may do some reordering at some point in the meeting, and I would just call to your attention that there was an awful lot of reading material for us to cover over the weekend and the last few days. And congratulations to all of you that got through it all. Ms. Harrison, it looks like you may have another person in the meeting. And just would say that we've got those supplemental items and we should proceed through to motion to adopt the agenda with the supplemental items. Do we have a mover? Moved by Director Yanni Donardo, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Are any opposed? Director, hang on. We'll go back. Director Acton on the agenda.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I haven't had a chance to look through those supplementals. Has everyone else? I was in a Zoom meeting. So if these are actually really important supplementals, I think it's a little unreasonable.
Well, they were submitted and distributed to folks at the earliest convenience that they could be.
Yeah, only a couple hours before this meeting.
So
So
we may
will we have a
to-
chance to go
Director
through them
Acton,
then?
hang on. Just hang on, Director Acton. What we'll do is when we come to that item, we will perhaps break for 5 or 10 minutes so everybody can take a quick few moments to peruse them. And if I could just be reminded of that when we get to the item, it's fairly early in the agenda, so we can do that. With that, any other discussion on the adoption of the agenda? I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? See none opposed, motion carries. Next item, number 2, Ms. Harrison, the resolution for number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 2 is the adoption of the minutes. And the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of October 7th, 2020 be adopted.
Do we have a mover? Moved by Director Yanni Donardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. Is there any discussion on adoption of these minutes? I see no discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? See none opposed. The motion carries. Ms. Harrison, any business arising from those minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is none.
Thank you. Public input period. Ms. Harrison, I gather we had a couple of submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have a couple of submissions. One moment while I start the timer. The first submission is from Ian Brand, and it reads, please include this in the public input for EASC meeting Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 for the Saltaire Water Service Requisition Limit. The people of Saltaire in 2012 approved increasing our parcel tax by $358 per year for 15 years for upgrades to water distribution system by signing on to the CVRD petition. When the bylaw was written, it left out the 15-year time frame. This has caused the people of Saltaire to doubt what the CVRD tells them. You need to correct this problem by put in place the 15-year limit on this increase as stated by the CVRD petition. We are currently having to approve a loan of $3.7 million for a filter system. If we can't trust the approval process in 2012, it will be difficult for people to have a confidence in what the CVRD is now telling us. Please correct this problem by adding the time limit into the bylaw. Thank you, Ian Brand. The next submission is from Gord Van Dyke, and it reads, Dear Chair Stone and members of the board, today I was disturbed to discover the Legislative Services Division Corporate Services Department is not recommending adding a sunset clause to the proposed amendment of bylaw number 2178, which would accurately reflect the nature of elector consent for the July 18th, 2012 amendment. The CVRD's failure to include such a sunset clause in CVRD bylaw number 3615 has undermined the amount of trust many Saltaire citizens place in the CVRD, even amongst the SDRA canvassers who went door to door in 2012 to assemble sufficient support for increasing our parcel tax by $358 per year for 15 years. Now the CVRD is about to ask Saltair Water System customers to trust it again by providing electric consent for a loan up to $3.7 million to fund the addition of filtration. The CVRD's failure to include a sunset clause in CVRD Bylaw 3615 is frequently discussed in Saltair. It means it would not take much to have Saltair Water Systems customers start and participate in a campaign opposing the upcoming alternative approval process. Accordingly, I urge the board to do the right thing and support option 3 in the October 9th, 2020 staff report to committee. Sincerely, Gord Van Dyke. And I have one more, I just have to scroll down to get it. This submission is from Richard Graham, and it reads, Chair Stone and members of the board, I think it is important that Saltair residents have the right to some control over the amount and the length of time that the tax on the Saltair water treatment facility be imposed on them. Therefore, I think that the board should support option 3 in the October 9th, 2020 staff report to committee, which includes a sunset clause limiting the time that the tax can be imposed for this specific project. Sincerely, Richard Graham. And that concludes our input.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Go to the next item, which is delegations. Are we having some feedback?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, but you have a John Trotter on with us with his microphone on.
And I have the host turn off Mr. Trotter's microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had moved him to the lobby and he popped back in again, so.
I see. Very good. So just before we get to correspondence items, I would just like to make note that I did make mention earlier that there's an awful lot of reading material and we have an awful lot of material to cover today. And just note that we should attempt to be thorough, but also be succinct and brief in our comments. And with that, I will go to correspondence C1. And it's a grant and aid request, and I'm going to go directly to Director Acton on this. I think she's got some desires in regards to this item. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just, I think for the sake of process, I'm encouraging my fellow committee members to defeat this request. It was time sensitive, and at this time, we're not able to pull it off.
Thank you, Director Acton. So everyone is clear. I will call the question on the resolution, and it's the recommendation of the area director that it be defeated. Any further comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opposed. The motion is defeated. Item C2, grant and aid request, Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill Farmers Institute, and I will read the recommendation for you that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $1,500 be provided to the Cobble Hill Farmers Institute to assist in replanting costs of 8 to 9 fruit trees, which are to be removed from the CVRD-owned Cobble Hill Commons, and the trees in question will be a substantial community addition, providing fruit to all and saving them from destruction. Turn to Director Wilson. Moving it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Nicholson. Director Wilson, would you like to speak to this resolution?
Yeah, very quickly, just to bring the board up to speed on this one. It's unfortunate that the Ministry of Environment have decreed that because of health reasons, the present irrigation that's used for those fruit trees is not up to health standards that they mandate. So they have to be removed. So rather than just trash them or take them to a dump somewhere, we're going to be moving them to the Farmers Institute, and this grant is to help with the relocation costs of those, and then that way we preserve the trees and we preserve the fruit as well within the area.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. That motion carries. Ms. Harrison, do we know which board meeting the recommendations coming from this meeting will be going to? What date?
Well, the next board is October 28th, so the deadline for that was Tuesday. I'm not sure if there's anything in here that's urgent. Then it would be the committee's role to include a date in their recommendation. So it would be that it would be recommended to the October 28th board. Otherwise, they'll go to the first one in November.
Which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the third week of November.
November 12th.
November 12th. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would very much like this to go to October the 28th if we can, please.
That's sufficient for staff, or do you need that tacked onto a resolution?
I would need that included in the resolution, please.
So let's just make a secondary resolution that the two items that we've just addressed in correspondence be sent to the October 28th meeting. Do we have a mover? Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. So I would just remind directors as we go through, if there are any particular directors and staff, actually, if there's any particular time sensitive issues that need to go forward for the 28th, that we make note of that. Director Acton?
Is this a new policy or something? Because in the past, everything has gone from the week before to the board.
Not everything has. For the most part, they do. And we've actually had, I think at our last meeting, we had 3 meetings worth of material at one board meeting. So staff do their best, but they're trying to make deadlines. So everybody's clear on that. So if staff know of anything, so I would just remind directors as we go through, if there are get a microphone on somewhere.
Rob, why don't you just use my computer?
Okay.
Or,
Okay.
yeah,
Can somebody mute Ms. Breen's computer, please?
it's got that really fancy nice camera at the front. So I need somebody to invite so I can share my screen.
Ms. Breen, can you please mute your computer? There, I think we go. Very good. No information items. That leads us to R1, and I will turn to Mr. Limshu for presentation of R1 to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen with you, if you bear with me for 1 minute.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. We have the applicants in the meeting as well.
Thank you. And just prior to us getting underway, for the applicant's benefit, Mr. Limshu will be making the presentation. The directors will have an opportunity to pose questions to to staff. Following that, we will ask if you have any additional comments that you'd like to add in addition to what the staff have just provided. Then an opportunity for directors, if there are any, to pose questions to you. Once that is completed, I'll be going to the directors for a resolution to put on the floor. Once the resolution is on the floor, you will not be able to participate any further. So when you're called to make comment, that will be your opportunity. So with that, Mr. Limshu, please proceed.
Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Item R1 relates to application number ALR 20H03. Property is located at 12850 Dole Road, PID number 027320502. Sorry, forgive me. I'm trying to, there we go. The applicant proposes to construct an additional residence for farm use on the 32-hectare property, which is located in the ALR. So as you see on the diagram or the plan to the right, we're talking about one legal parcel at this point in time, which is bisected by Dole Road. Just a brief history as to how the owners originally purchased 8.8 hectares of forestry zone land. So currently the property is split zone between forestry and agriculture. 8.8 hectares relates to this parcel here. So as noted in the staff report, in 2003, the property was originally purchased by the current owners. In 2007, the same owners purchased the adjacent property, which is zoned agriculture in this section. And subsequently, after that purchase, consolidated the two parcels into one. Having said that, the zoning for both sections remained in place. However, the entire parcel is located within the ALR. The applicants are proposing what's called a non-adhering residential use application to the Land Commission to allow for the construction of a second dwelling. The proposed dwelling size is approximately 176 square meters. The forestry portion allows for one dwelling. So there is an existing dwelling in this location here, which was built at the time that the owners purchased the site. The agriculture zone portion allows for a second dwelling unit on parcels larger than 2 hectares. So as mentioned, the first dwelling was constructed at the time of original purchase on the forestry section. The second residence is proposed to be on the agricultural portion of the property, located on a rocky bluff near Dole Road, which is basically unusable for forestry purposes. So these photos give you a sense of look and feel of the property. And this map basically illustrates the location of the existing dwelling versus the location of the proposed dwelling. Summarize, the proposed development complies with both the official community plan and the zoning bylaw. So I think I'll stop there, and with that, open the floor for questions from the committee.
Could you lower your screen, please? So I'd just like to remind the directors that there is a supplemental item from Minister Popham that was distributed earlier today. So I draw your attention to that item. And I've got Director Acton on the list to pose questions to Mr. Limshu. Is there anyone else that has any questions for staff? Go ahead, Director Acton.
Yes, sorry, I forgot about that supplemental. I was going to look at it first. Can you come back to me? And I'll just review it as people are speaking.
I will do that. It appears that we have no other speakers with questions for Mr. Limshu at this point, but I may grant you some latitude here because we have the applicant here as well, and the applicant may want to have something to add to the presentation so far. So I've got you on my list still. So I would go to directors again and pose the question. Any questions for staff for Mr. Limshu? Seeing none, I will then invite the Edwards to join the meeting now. And you've heard what Mr. Lim Shu has presented. The report has been published. I would now ask if you have any comments or additional items that you'd like to bring to our attention in regards to this file. Your mic is live. You should be able to just go ahead and speak. John and Jillian Edwards. Looks like Jillian just got up and left. Are they able to hear us? Are we able to raise the Edwards? It's their go time, so to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just see if I can send them a quick email.
Very good. John and Jillian Edwards, can you hear me? This is Chair Morrison. So given dead air is never a good thing, I think what I will do is right now, let's take a 10-minute break. Anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to review the items, the supplemental items for the next item R2, please take a look at them now. I will ask staff to see about getting the Edwards back online, and let's return at 2:05, and we will go right back to the Edwards for their input and additional comments. Remember to turn off your
Ian, your mic is off.
Thank you. So just to recap, we're going to the Edwards now. We've had the presentation by staff and would ask if there's anything that the Edwards would like to add or information you'd like the directors to know before we consider your application. Please go ahead.
Is there anything you want to add, John? Well, the main thing, I guess, is that we really need to have this extra residence for our son. This farm is very large, and we can't manage on our own anymore. And both have had health issues, and land is very expensive for young farmers to start out. And John, our son John, is very keen to start a new career. So I just wanted to add that. We need our family here.
Thank you very much for that. I will just go to my colleagues and ask if there are any questions for the applicants. Director Nicholson, please proceed.
I don't have any questions, but I'd be pleased to move the recommendation.
We have the resolution moved and seconded by Director Kuhn. Is there any discussion on this item? I saw Director Wilson with his hand up. Was that just a second? Fair enough. So the resolution, and that is that it be recommended to the board that application number ALR 20H03 for 12850 Dual Road, PID noted, ALCID number 61224 be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission with a recommendation for approval. Any further discussion? Director Acton?
Well, this question would be for staff. The application brought up some questions for me, and I just tried to find to review it, and I can't see. Would this be an opportunity to, like, I can sympathize with the landowners, but is this something that would warrant a covenant so that it does remain a family residence?
Generally, we ask those questions under the question section, but I'll let Mr.
Well, we cut off that part.
I'll let Mr. Limshu come in and respond to this. I'm not sure that. Go ahead, Mr. Limshu.
Yeah, I don't believe a covenant is warranted under these circumstances, just given the situation with respect to the property being split zone. I mean, typically for applications that are referred to us from the Agricultural Land Commission, usually the recommendation is to just forward the application on to the ALC for them to make a decision to that regard. So what will happen is once we've forwarded our recommendation, the Land Commission will then evaluate the application based on its merits, which will include a site visit and meeting with the owners on site. And if they feel, I believe if the Land Commission feels that such a covenant is warranted, it'd probably be best for that agency to make the requirement.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, strike me off from that one. I've calmed down now. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Do we have any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion carries. This is going to the board. Is this a time-sensitive item? Turn to staff. Mr. Limshu?
I believe the applicants would appreciate having their file forwarded to Land Commission sooner than later.
I have a resolution moving that this be included on the 28th agenda, moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Next item, R2. Turn to Mr. Limshu. And would you invite the applicants for this one in, please, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen once again.
And just before you get started, the applicants are with us now. Ms. Not yet? Hang on, Mr. Limshu.
Oh, that was.
Well, we got through anyway. They're in trouble with that stuff too.
Well, they are. I think that's not it. Let's leave them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is not present, but their agent is Mr. Ian Ralston.
Very good. Go ahead, Mr. Limshu.
Thank you. Item R2 relates to application number DVP 20D01, Lot 7, Fairbanks Road. The purpose of the application, the report, is to present an application for a development variance permit to vary section 5.14B of CVRD Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Upland Zoning Bylaw number 3705, 2013, to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling on Lot 7, as shown on the subject property plan before you. The application to vary the front parcel line setback was received after the property owner realized the location of the proposed building would need to encroach into the setback in order to satisfy the geotechnical recommendations. Based on slope geometry, soil conditions observed on site, slope stability modeling was carried out to determine the setback requirement from the top of bank. So this is what we're talking about in terms of the top of bank. The geotechnical engineer has recommended an 8-meter setback from the slope for deck foundations and a 10-meter setback for the building wall foundations. These setbacks are meant to accommodate the long-term slope regression due to erosion. So here are the two setback lines. So as indicated, the request for the development variance permit is to relax the front yard setback of the property. In reviewing the application, the applicants did submit supporting documentation from geotechnical engineer and professional hydrologist. The geotechnical engineer's report commented on the slope stability and made recommendations with respect to setback from the crest, as indicated. Whereas the report from the hydrologist commented on the location of the existing well, location of the proposed septic fields, and their proximity to adjacent well and septic fields on the properties for either side of the subject lands, with recommendations on safety and recommendations for design. The site itself is fairly challenging, and as indicated previously with respect to the supplemental information received from the adjacent or from the surrounding property owners, there is concern with respect to ensuring that the development that's being proposed is appropriate for the site, given the physical constraints that currently exist. I know that the applicant's agent is on the call. So with that, I think I'll stop here and answer any questions that the committee may have for us.
Mr. Limshu, could you lower your presentation? And just for Mr. Ralston's information, we will first go to questions from the committee members to staff. And following completion of those questions, we will ask if you've got any additional information or material that you'd like to provide to the committee members following completion of that. If there's any questions from committee members to you, then that will be the time. And once a resolution is put on the floor and seconded, that your participation. So I will now go to committee members. Are there any questions for staff on R2? Director Nicholson, proceed.
So I'm a little bit confused about the well, where the well is, where the septic field's going, and how that relates to the neighbors, and the letter from the Ministry of Transportation, which says that that a well and a shed are on the road allowance, and that they may have to be moved in the future. So what does that mean in terms of possibilities to relocate them onto the property?
Mr. Limshu?
You're correct. So in the information package that was provided and on the site plan that I presented, I probably should have spent a bit more time explaining the location of those two items. There is an existing well. The time that the well was drilled, it was noted after the fact that the well was drilled within the road right of way, and which is located, so the well is located towards the front of the property. The proposed septic field is located towards the rear of the property, basically right above the crest of the slope, and so these are when the hydrologists prepared the report, they were basically taking a look at those two issues to ensure that the location of both the well and the septic field were in appropriate locations. General requirements with respect to the separation between a well and a septic field is 30 meters. The challenge for this subdivision is that the lots are fairly small when you look at what the buildable area is for each of those lots. And I'm not just talking about this particular lot, but I'm talking about the subdivision along that entire street. And so it does present a challenge with respect to trying to fit everything in. So your well, your septic, your house, and then on top of that, you've got to make sure that you're not negatively impacting the adjacent properties, their well and septic systems. And so that is what the hydrologist report speaks to.
Follow up, Director Nicholson?
Thank you. So I understand that, but then my question is, will this house, if the Ministry of Transportation requires the well to be moved, is there a possibility that it will fit after all this stuff is built or not? Because you may end up with a place without water.
Mr. Limshu.
That's correct. Under normal circumstances, the well would be contained solely on the property. In this case, it's not given the limitations. I'm not in a position to answer your question because I don't think it's a simple yes or no. It will depend on where, if they do need to move that well at some future date. I'm not quite sure whether or not there is an alternate appropriate site on the property to accommodate that well.
Director Nicholson, would you like to pose that to the applicant when we get around to hearing from the applicant's agent?
Yes, sure. But I guess I have one follow-up question about that, though. It seems to me that this is a risk that ought to be put on the title or something, so that if someone bought the property, they understood what was going on.
Mr. Limshu?
I believe that's an option we can certainly pursue with the applicant to ensure that. Having been on the property, I can see why someone may have drilled the well where they did. The road is located higher than the actual buildable area. So without knowing, if you were to go out there today, without knowing where the property lines actually sit, you would think that the well location was actually part of the parent parcel. It's not until the surveyors have gone out there and put the pins in the ground that we've confirmed that, in fact, and the surveyor has confirmed that the well is in fact off the parcel.
And I would just remind everyone that the application before us is in regards to a variance. So I would ask, are there any other questions for staff at this point? Director Acton, please.
Well, so I really struggle with variances. Without going to the site, we can't actually know, but I feel like this is, all these variances are happening because we're trying to put a house on a piece of property that maybe should be looking at something quite different.
Director Acton, do you have a question for staff or a comment when the residents?
Well, I guess, is there a way for this to actually work out properly without these variances?
Mr. Limshu, I think the short answer to this is that they didn't have to do apply for a variance, they wouldn't be before us today. Mr. Limshu?
So the answer to your question, I guess theoretically, you could try to design a house to meet all the setback requirements without requiring a variance. That would most likely require that the house be reduced in size. The variance is required to accommodate the house that the applicants are wanting to build on the property.
Any follow-up, Director Acton? Thank you. Any other questions for staff at this point? I see no hands up. Turn to Mr. Ralston. It's now your opportunity to provide any additional information or comments that you'd like to committee members. Please go ahead. Mr. Ralston, can you hear me? We apparently are having the same issue we had with the last applicants. Ian Ralston, can you hear the chair? Ms. Harrison, have you got a fix for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just moved him into the lobby and then back into the meeting and to see if that would solve the issue.
Very good.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Mr. Ralston.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. Yep. Yep.
We can hear you now.
Excellent. All right. So. Okay. Just a sec. The geotechnical engineer, Andrew Jackson from RISEC, was not able to attend today. So I was asked to step in. I can say that he did write an email today clarifying that he continues to be comfortable with the location of the house in relation to the bank and considers it to be safe. I can also comment that the apparent buildable area in the sort of low slope part of the lot, with the variance, the house would use the most sort of buildable part of the lot in terms of the shape of the ground. I can comment about the existing well, which is perhaps a meter or so over the property line. I am not a well expert, but my understanding is that the original idea for siting that well is to place it as close to the property line as possible. And so I would imagine that the original proposed siting, which would have been just over the property line in the other direction, would still be workable if it was necessary to move it, and would still maintain the 15-meter regulatory setback to other existing wells in the neighborhood, and would still fall within the hydrogeologist's custom setback provisions for the septic tanks, which we have a report for that. And I would say that the septic field in its new location is now more than 30 meters from all of the wells, both the neighboring wells and the on-site well, which is not the case with the current septic field, which is within 30 meters of 3 wells. So there's actually an improvement in that regard. So I think probably other than that, I will leave it to you to ask me questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ralston. I turn to committee. Are there any questions of the applicant's agent from the committee members? I see no questions from committee member. Oh, Director Nicholson, you have a question for the applicant's agent.
Well, I'm not sure if it's for Mr. Ralston or for Mr. Limshu, but I would be interested to know what the footprint of the building is.
Mr. Limshu, I think that was contained in the report. Do you have it at hand?
It is. I'm gonna ask if file planner Emily Dixon has that information on hand.
So can I just ask, are there any further questions for the applicant from any of the directors? Okay, I see none. So, Mr. Ralston, thank you very much for your participation in the meeting today. We'll be going to a resolution soon. Ms. Dixon, can you help us with the building footprint, please? Go ahead, Ms. Dixon.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if I can share my screen.
Absolutely.
So the image before you, hopefully you can see that, is the lower floor plan of the proposed building, which appears to be 1717 square feet. The upper floor plan would be 965.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Does that answer your question, Director Nicholson? Very good. Could you lower your presentation so I can see the rest of the committee, please? Are there no further discussion? I'll turn to the director for the area. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move option 2, that it be recommended to the board the development variance permit number DVP20D01 Lot 7 Fairbanks Road be denied. And if I get a seconder, I'd like to speak to that.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Smith.
Thank you so much.
Moved and seconded. Go ahead, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. I think there was a lot of questions from my fellow directors on this, and that is a concern in our community. The limitations of this site and the variance the community does not support, and it doesn't support the size of this structure. So that is the reason why I am denying this.
While you're requesting that your colleagues support your denial.
I was hoping that, yes, please.
Any other discussion on this matter? Director Acton.
So this is more like a procedure thing, but did we
So do you have a point of order?
I don't know. No point of order, but it's unfortunate for these applicants to come this far. So I think in the future, our board tends to not support these kinds of variants. So maybe perhaps a conversation happened at the beginning of the application, but am I allowed to say that now?
So
if it's denied.
We have an application to deny before us, and that's more of a procedural thing that can be discussed when we're discussing our policies and procedures. So at this
kind
point,
of timely because anyway, fine.
So Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Well, would it be more appropriate to refer it back to staff to maybe see if the applicants want to reduce their footprint and figure out a better plan?
Well, we have a resolution that's been duly moved and seconded, moved by the director for the area. And are you moving a referral motion?
Well, I actually have a question for staff. Would that be a more appropriate way to
well, hang on.
helpful way of dealing with this than actually denying it and then they have to start again? I don't know. It's just.
So this is where our job, this is our job. We've been presented with the information. We've had additional information come to us. These are one of the two options. I turned to the director. Director has made a positive recommendation and is asking for our support. So if there's a recommendation to refer, someone has to move a recommendation to refer. And there has to be a seconder. We will vote on that, and that's a non-debatable motion. So I'm going to ask now, we have a properly moved resolution. Is there a motion to refer by one of the directors? Director Kuhn.
Yes, I move to refer. I think Director.
Hang on, Director Kuhn.
Very
referral motion. A referral motion is not debatable. So we have to get a seconder first. And I'm looking around the room to see if there's a seconder for the resolution to refer. I see no seconder. So fails due to a lack of a seconder. We go back to the original resolution, which is option number 2. Any further debate on option number 2? Director Smith.
Thank you. When people purchase lots such as this, they come with complications, and I think that it's very important that they take the time to do due diligence. Driving around our Cowichan Valley Regional District, you can see multiple homes that have been designed to fit on the property. Some of them come with really interesting angles, but I think it's possible with an architect, working with an architect, that the footprint could actually not even require a development variance permit. So I support the denying of it at this time.
Thank you, Director Smith. I see no other hands in the air. I'm going to call the question. Actually, I'm going to read the resolution that I just had it on my screen. Anybody need the resolution read out? It's to deny. I look at Ms. Harrison. Do you have the resolution at hand? My screen just went dark. Director, Ms. Harrison.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that development variance permit number DVP 20D01 for Lot 7 Fairbanks Road, PID 003457265 be denied.
Everyone's clear on the resolution. Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Director Kuhn opposed. The denial motion carries. Next item, R3. And R3, call on Mr. Limshu. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, just to advise that the applicant, Mr. John Trache, is in the meeting.
Your mic's on mute, Mr. Chair.
Just so you understand the process here, Mr. Trache, as Mr. Limshu brings up the presentation, he will make the presentation. Directors will ask questions of staff. When that's concluded, we will go to you. If you have any additional information you'd like to provide with committee members, we may pose questions to you. When that section is completed, we will take a resolution from one of the directors. Your participation will conclude at that point when we have a resolution on the floor. So with that, I would turn to Mr. Limshu. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3 relates to application number DVP 20E07. The property is located at 4386 Pollock Road, PID number 004215621. The purpose of the application is to request a development variance permit to vary the size of an existing accessory building located on the subject property. The subject lands is approximately 6.85 acres, access from Pollock Road. Currently on the property, there's existing dwelling, which is the primary residence, a small detached suite, and the accessory building in question. The accessory building was constructed in 1995 without any permit. The reason that this has come before us is that the applicant has sold the property, and as a condition of the sale, is committed to legalizing the existing oversized accessory building. The maximum accessory building size under the zoning bylaw is 100 square meters. The accessory building is approximately 143 square meters, thus requiring a variance. The site plan that you see before you shows the general location of the existing accessory building in question. Building Inspection Division has reviewed this application and is prepared to issue a building permit for the existing accessory building, provided they are successful in obtaining a development variance permit. So with that, I will open up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Limshu. Thank you for lowering your presentation. Do you directors have any questions for Mr. Limshu? I see no questions for Mr. Limshu. Could we have does the applicant have anything that they would like to add to the presentation that you've heard just now? Just want to make sure that, go ahead, please. Ms. Harrison? You're muted, Ms. Harrison.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears that the applicant has dropped out of the meeting. I've just sent them another invite, hoping they reconnect, but they are not on our participant list nor in our lobby.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Do we want to come back to this? Nicholson, go ahead.
Could I ask a question about when people do things without permits, do we penalize them at all, or do they just pay the fees when they actually get around to try to become legal?
Mr. Limshu, do you want to take that, or do we get Ms. Chirel for Mr. McDonald on for that one?
Well, I believe I can start
Go ahead.
the answer. So with respect to penalties, the application fee is doubled when there is a bylaw infraction required. So for example, if the development permit fee is $300 as an example, because there's an infraction, that application fee would be $600. So that's one of the penalties that we have. A lot of times we review the items on a case by case basis. So context is very important in terms of whether or not there's the motion to have the property owner remove the violation, or certainly all property owners have the opportunity and the option to make application to try and legitimize the infraction, whether it be setback, building height, square footage in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Limshu. Is anybody else hearing a fair bit of background noise, or is it just me? So we are. I think we've probably got the applicants have rejoined us. Is that true? No, they haven't rejoined us. So what's the committee's pleasure? Are we ready to proceed with this, or would you like to put this off until we can see if they rejoin us? I turn to the director for the area. What's your pleasure?
I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
The recommendation's been moved and seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion on this item? The resolution is that development variance permit number DVP 20E07 for 4386 Pollock Road for PID 004215621. Is that the right one? Be issued. Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Is this a time-sensitive one, or can it go through the regular? I saw Director Nicholson. Director Nicholson, do you want this one to go through on the 28th?
I don't think it needs to.
Okay, excellent. Next item is R4. Mr. Limshu, please. Do we have an applicant attending today for R4? We do not. Mr. Limshu, please proceed.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair. If it's the committee's pleasure to have an item moved forward to next week's board meeting, it doesn't need to be two separate recommendations, just the one. And the beginning of it starts that it be recommended to the October 28th board. So just bear that in mind while we're going through these. If there's something of particular urgency, that's what we would be doing, and not doing two separate ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. And that was sort of what I was alluding to at the beginning of the meeting, that if maybe the chair or the area director or a staff person could remember that before we read the resolution out, that would make it a whole bunch easier. But I haven't been able to keep up so far. So let's muddle on through. And if you do happen to remember that it's time sensitive, then let's make sure we put that at the beginning of the resolution. Mr. Limshu, please proceed. Mr. Limshu, you're muted.
Oh. Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry, I'm going to just share my screen. Item R4 relates to application number DP20B08. Subject property is located at 1190 Stonecrest Way, PID number 027-675-220. The plan that you see in front of you just gives you an indication of the location of the subject property and a bit of context with respect to the surrounding property sizes. The purpose of the report is to present a development permit application subject to the South Cowichan Rural Development Permit Area for the purpose of creating a two-lot subdivision. So the plan before you outlines the proposed subdivision. The parcels, parcel A, if approved, would be approximately 2.74 hectares versus parcel B, which would be 2.22 hectares. As outlined in the recommendation, there is a recommendation to relax the 10% frontage rate because of the fact that access to this lot is via a panhandle into proposed strata lot B. In addition, given the zoning on the property, this parcel would be subject to an amending contribution of $10,000 for the new lot that it is created. The proposed development permit application is supported by a rainwater infiltration assessment, and through the development permit process, that rainwater infiltration assessment document will form part of the development permit itself. And certainly the expectation is that moving forward, the owners of the newly created parcel would be subject to meeting the requirements and recommendations outlined within that document. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Limshu. I look to directors if you have any questions of staff. Seeing no questions of staff, and we don't have an applicant here today, I will turn to the director for the area, which I think is Director Acton.
I'd like to move the staff's recommendation, please.
Seconded by Director Kuhn. On the resolution that it be recommended to the board that development permit number DP20B08 for the address listed there be issued. Two, that the required cash amenity contribution of $10,000 for the development permit listed there be made to the Shawnigan Lake Recreation Specified Area Capital Projects Reserve Fund pursuant to the Electoral Area B zoning bylaw 985. Under 7.3C sub G, minimum parcel size and amenity requirement for Goldstream Heights. And number 3, that the subject property be exempt from the requirement for a minimum 10% lot frontage onto a road in accordance with Section 512 of the Local Government Act. Any further discussion on that item? Call Director Acton. Oh, she was jumping the gun. Call a question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion carries. Any urgency of that one, Director Acton? Okay. R5, information item. I gather we have Mr. McDonald perhaps available for any questions that staff or directors may have. Report's fairly explanatory, self-explanatory. Any questions for Mr. McDonald? Seeing none, proceed to the next item, R6, quarterly report. For everyone read it. Director Acton, question for Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
My question is more along the lines of, we see these reports, but we never see a report from bylaw. Like, for example, how many bylaw infractions are still open, how many have, have been solved, that kind of thing. I feel like that would be a report that would be really useful.
Mr. McDonald.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just didn't beat the deadline for the report for bylaw. They are separate reports, but there will hopefully be one at the next ESC meeting in 2 weeks.
Director Acton.
Yes, but those ones as well are just are hard to understand, like how many are outstanding, how long, like that kind of thing, so that we can understand how is our bylaw program working, and then we can see, how many are being solved and at what kind of rate. That to me would be valuable information. And so either we have it, I would like to have this conversation maybe another time, but I just thought this was an opportunity to bring it up and for our committee to give it some thought, or, some comments from other people would be appreciated on this topic.
Mr. McDonald?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would certainly look for direction from the committee. We could spend extra resource time putting that data together if that is the direction we are given.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. It's my understanding that as a result of the work done at the corporate strategic planning, that we are looking at another process for adjudicating and looking at our enforcement issues. I don't know when that might be coming forward, and if Mr. Carruthers or perhaps Ms. Chirolf might want to chime in now, that might be a good time, but I do recall the discussion. And there is another format that we could adopt if we wanted to pursue this further. Mr. Carruthers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Your corporate strategic plan will be coming to the board on the 28th. We don't have definitive timelines for that specific review. I can ask Ms. Chirolf if she had a sense in her work plan when that might be undertaken.
Ms. Chirolf, would you like to join us for that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we don't have definitive timelines at this time. We'll work with the manager when we get that direction from the board. But I did want to also note that as with development services, we have a similar situation with bylaw enforcement where some of the reporting is challenging because of the insufficient or inadequate systems that we have in place. Or I shouldn't use insufficient, I mean, antiquated might be a better word. and we hope to resolve that in the future as well. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? I believe these were information items. And I think, Mr. McDonald, are you up next for R7?
I am.
Do you have a presentation for us?
Actually, because of the presentation that you had 2 weeks ago from Maya Chorbik, there is no way I could top that presentation. So I just have a report. I would like to just speak to the recommended resolution, though. There's a lot of challenges at this point in time to mandate the STEP code. So there is the issues with access to energy advisors. There are a lot of challenges now with COVID-19, and there's arisen quite an increase to the cost of construction as well. So I also included an attachment, which was actually attachment C, which shows the bulk of the island, Vancouver Island, and what the various districts and municipalities are doing. Most of them are doing a wait and see approach. So that was why I brought my recommendation forward. And I can answer any questions if you like.
Very good. Director Nicholson, please proceed. Question to Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. I was really curious as to why you would not have recommended going to step 2 in May of 2021 so that we would be consistent with what North Cowichan is doing.
To you, Mr. Chair, we're looking at the wait and see approach as pretty much everybody else is. So we're letting North Cowichan test the waters and see how they make out with energy advisors. So we thought we'd see how it goes for them first and then piggyback on the work they've done.
Do you have a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Just a comment, but I can save that.
Okay. Director Kuhn?
I move to staff recommendation number 1.
Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Now would be any comment on that. I'll go back to Director Nicholson. We have a resolution moved and seconded, and the resolution, go ahead with your comments.
I think that it would be important to show some leadership in this area, because you need to send a signal to the market about the energy advisors. And I know that there are several down in Victoria, so we're not that far away. And it strikes me that we should really be getting on with it, because yeah, it's the way that we're moving in the future, and we should just be pushing our community to be a leader on this front.
Thank you. Director Salmon.
Yeah, I think with North Couch and moving, I would agree with Director Nichols. I prefer to be in line with what they're doing, and especially if it's coming up, if it would take effect, is it next May? Then there is some time to prepare for that. So I'd prefer to go that route.
Thank you. Director Kuhn, I was next on the list, but go ahead, Director Kuhn.
Well, I agree with staff. I think they made the right recommendation. And when I first heard about this report, I was a little bit worried that maybe we will try to prove everybody else again that we are the best. And I don't see a necessity for that. All it does is cost us more money. We might as well wait to see how it turns out in North Cowichan and then move with everybody else. I'm sick and tired of the CVRD trying to stand up in the front and indicating that we are the best and we are this. It's all costing us a ton of money, and I'm just not in favor of that.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. You've said more than what I would say, so I am going to pass, and I'm going to move to calling the question. We have a resolution on the floor that staff prepare amendments to CVRD bylaw number 3422, Building Regulation Bylaw 2011, as needed to remain consistent with the basic requirements of the BC Building Code. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Chair, Mr. McDonald had his hand up.
We had a resolution moved, and at that point, we're moving forward with the vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Director Salmon and Director Nicholson opposed. That resolution carries. Is there anyone wanting to move that resolution go forward to the board on the 28th? Seeing none, I guess it's going forward to the next regular board meeting. Next item, R8, and this is a report from Parks and Trails Division. Who on staff will be taking that item?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee.
Welcome, Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you. This is concerning CVRD's owned Thetis Island Wharf facility over on Thetis Island that came across to the regional district from the federal government back in 2003. Following a port transfer feasibility assessment study. But ultimately, the outcome of that was under the federal ports divestiture program was the wholesale transfer of the Thetis Island Wharf to the regional district. And at the same time, we also entered into a contribution agreement with the federal government where they committed $300,000 to making a number of improvements to the wharf. As noted in the report at the time, there was interest in the community on Thetis Island and Hudson Island to see the continuance of that wharf facility, both from an emergency after-hours access off the island in case of emergency, as well as for recreational opportunities. And through the board at the time, a Thetis Island Port Commission was established, as well as engaging with the overall community to determine if there was support to set up a bylaw to tax for the ongoing operation and maintenance of the facility, which was supported by the majority of property owners on the island. Hence, the bylaw was passed back then, bylaw 2356 for the services establishment bylaw for Thetis Island Wharf. So over the years, this wharf has been maintained after the initial investment, but in recent years, certainly the Thetis Island Port Commission has been chomping at the bit to have a further assessment done. That work was supported by the board to put in this year's budget with an additional $15,000 to do a marine engineering assessment, and that is attached to this report done by Herald Engineering. And they looked at everything from the current condition of the pier, the floats, as well as the pilings, and have provided options in terms of continued use and upkeep of the wharf facility, or the option to remove and replace with a more contemporary structure. And a couple of things of note in their report to the regional district is that the current condition of the pier itself is deemed that it cannot support vehicles. And they are advising this time that, based on their assessment, that we move to close vehicle access to the pier until such time as longer-term decisions around the facility are made. And as noted in the report, to have it as a pedestrian access only, the cost projected to invest in that in the near future, i.e. over the next year, would be to the tune of $100,000, $98,000. To include the ability to continue to drive vehicles on it, you would be up to the order of $149,000, and both would also include additional fees for project management, engineering fees, etc. The other thing we asked the engineers to look at was the ongoing operation and maintenance, because under the existing bylaw for Thetis Island wharf facility, it's a maximum of $15,000 per year, which is through parcel tax. And as noted in the report, what we've been advised by the engineers, forecasting out over the next 10 to 15 years, the ongoing maintenance of a wooden pier facility in a marine environment is projected to cost upwards of $25,000 a year, given there's going to be other major works in the coming years to be done. So that's certainly something that with the community, CVRD, working with the Port Commission, are going to have to make some determinations in terms of how can the ongoing funding of this facility be maintained through initial investment to do the upgrades that the engineers have advised now, but looking longer term in terms of this is an important asset for the community. So the recommendation for the committee today is that the report be referred to the Thetis Island Port Commission, and per the conditions around organization of commission meetings, that staff work with the Port Commission chair to establish a meeting with the Port Commission to review this report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. Are there any questions for staff at this point? I see no one with hands up for questions to staff, so I would turn to the director for the area, Director Smith.
Thank you. Thetis Island obviously is a unique area, and the wharf is also a unique feature under the CVRD. Some of the background information seems that the Ministry of Transportation divested to the Thetis Island. They granted the $374,000 to restore the wharf, and and then it was later ceded to the CVRD. There is a bylaw, which is bylaw 2400, that indicates what the responsibilities and the roles of the commission is. With the recommendation that's currently there, I would like to make a change to the recommendations. I have sent the recommendations out to the directors, and I did send it to Legislative Services. So it is on file. And is it possible for me to read it out, or did Ms. Harrison want to read it out?
First of all, I'm curious because I got a lot of emails today. I'm not sure that I saw that recommendation. Has everyone else had an opportunity to peruse the information that's been provided by Director Smith?
It was provided last night.
Oh, that might explain it. I was probably sleeping. Okay, everybody's comfortable then proceeding with the information that's been provided so far. Can I get a nod from someone or a wave? Okay, then Ms. Harrison, this is a staff report, but this is a director recommendation. So you can move your recommendation if you wish, but it's a little awkward in that it's not been published to this point. Is my
It's been published with the directors.
But hasn't been published publicly. So please
well,
proceed.
Many of them.
Please proceed with your resolution, Director Smith.
Okay, recommend under CVRD bylaw number 2400, powers and responsibilities, the Thetis Island Port Commission is empowered to exercise the management, operation, and control of the wharf and the custodianship, care, maintenance of all premises. Therefore, the engineering report from Herald Engineering is already under the responsibility of the Thetis Island Port Commission. A, the Port Commission requests the Electoral Area Service Committee direct to the Land Use Service Department to provide the Port Commission access to Herald Engineering to discuss and review the report. B, the Commission requests that Electoral Area Service Committee direct the Land Use Services Department to provide access to communication with Michael Miller, the Capital Project Specialist. C, the Commission requests that the Electoral Area Service Committee direct the Land Use Services to cease the closure of the wharf to vehicle traffic and the expenditure of funds for the bullards and gates until the Port Commission has reviewed the engineering report with Herald Engineering. That is my recommendation.
That recommendation has been moved by Director Smith. Is there
Ian's disappeared.
For a sec?
Oh, there he is.
Director Acton.
Okay, you got cut off a bit. Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question. The floor is yours.
So, no disrespect, Director Smith, that was the longest resolution I've ever heard. I can't support that. I can't even place it in my mind what all those steps meant and what the consequences to us would be. And like, I think perhaps we could refer this whole thing back and have the director work with staff.
Director Kuhn.
Yes, I would like to see that done too. I cannot see supporting a resolution which I'm not a legal expert, but I could imagine there would be legal ramifications to that. So I'd like to see staff review that, and if that's okay, then bring it back forward.
Are you making a resolution to refer this to staff? Is there a seconder?
Well, sure.
Your mic's still open, Director Acton.
Oops.
So on the propriety of referral of this matter and Director Smith's resolution, any discussion? I could, but I won't. All those in favor of referral? Are there any opposed? Not opposed, the motion carries. We've been a little over an hour, and I'm going to have us break for 10 minutes.
With the secondary suite, I'm not sure if Carriage Homes is a separate one, but we are moving into that with our modernization. I just wondered what the cost.
For Sentinel Ridge, so we charge for the main residence and for the secondary suite. They both have to pay connection fees, and I think I just have to grab Louise actually because she knows exactly those numbers. One moment. Louise, there she is. What's that? 2,000. $2,000 for the second. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bearing with me. She was right here. So it's $2,000 for the secondary suite only. Most of the charges for the primary suite. And we generally do have that in our bylaws. I just wasn't certain if this one was one of those because we don't want to discourage secondary suites. There's a tendency if the charge is too high for people not to connect and they'll go illegal with a secondary suite. So we want to see them on board. We want to be able to be aware of their presence, the loading to the system, and not discourage the more affordable secondary suites. So that's the approach you've taken.
Director Nicholson. Director Nicholson, I thought I saw your hand up there a moment ago.
No, I'm fine now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else questions for staff? Seeing none, turn to the director for the area.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Wilson, and the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, one, certificate of sufficiency confirming a sufficient petition for inclusion in the Sentinel Ridge sewer service area be received. Number two, CVRD bylaw 2790 for that service area be amended to include the property, and the legal description is there. Number three, that the amendment to bylaws 2790 be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings, and upon payment of capacity connection fees be considered for adoption. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Next item. Thank you, Mr. Dennison. Who's taking the Regional District and Nanaimo Airport referral?
Oh, that would be Mr. Tippett.
Mr. Tippett, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to the committee. Yes, this is just a reprise of the referral which we dealt with. I think it was a Regional Services Committee or board, I forget. But anyway, you'll probably remember the referral on the proposed rezoning for Nanaimo Airport. The Regional District then considered the comments that we sent to them last time, and they made an adjustment or two to the proposed bylaws. And the purpose of this second report is just to inform the committee of the changes made and to suggest that it would be appropriate to send or to make another resolution in support of the proposed amendments, or some resolution that we could send back to the Nanaimo Regional District. And I wanted to add that there's a bit of a time issue related to this, so whatever resolution comes out of this meeting today, it would be great if it could go to the 28th of October board, because there's a public hearing early in November that the RDN will be holding, and they need to receive our comments before that hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tippett. Any questions for Mr. Tippett? Seeing none, the recommendation is that it be recommended to the October 28th board. Way to be on the ball there, Mr. Tippett. That the Regional District of Nanaimo be advised that the Couch Valley Regional District supports the proposed bylaw amendments in the vicinity of the Nanaimo Airport. Do we have a mover? Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. That motion carries, and that'll go to the 28th. R11, report from the Finance Division, Budget 250, 2021 budget referral for direction. I gather we'll have Ms. Soldera come forward. This is a referral back from the board, I believe. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just guide me here. I have some remarks that I'd like to make on this. Do I do that now, or wait until the thing's been read out?
Well, at this point, we don't have a resolution on the floor, and I would turn to committee and ask whether we want to put a resolution on the floor and debate it, or whether we want to go around the table. What's the pleasure? I see lots of people want to speak, so why don't we we'll have some comments first, then we'll go to a resolution. So go ahead, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. all of us who have been in business, even if we're independent or in organizations, we all know the value of contacts and networking. It's one of the things that we absolutely need, and I appreciate the need for those. But in this respect, I am a great believer in local conferences such as AVICC, UBCM, and Vancouver Island Economic Authority. One of the things that I'm not convinced about is that which takes place thousands of kilometers away with the additional load that puts on the green areas that we're trying to make better. And to be perfectly honest, I honestly don't see any tangible benefit in attending things like FCM. And my preference in this particular case would be to defund that particular activity completely. However, I am prepared to compromise and propose 50% funding for FCM and for the, well, let's deal with FCM first of all. As far as FCM is concerned, I'm prepared to resolve and make a resolution that we fund it for 50% of its normal with the following provisos. The first one being that only the EASC chair is always designated to attend. The second one would that be only 3 directors in any 1 year are chosen by ballot or whichever way to attend with him. The following year, 3 others could go who weren't before, etc. And somebody, and that's the way a lot of the regional districts are doing. It's a way of spending, of saving money. And the third one is that no staff attend unless absolutely necessary and designated by the EADs. And I have had a long chat with finance with Ms. Wayner on this, and she's put me straight on a lot of things. So from that point of view, I'm not prepared to defund this one particularly with nothing. I'm prepared to go 50% with those provisos. I'm also prepared to make a resolution if necessary that we fund the other conferences such as VIEA and AVICC, etc., at 50%, not to the 0 point that is being suggested in here. We will then see a reduction in the property taxes for 2021, and it will also, if necessary, bring back less of a bump if we have to fully fund those in the future. So basically, I'm in favor of 50%. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the speakers list, I just want to be very clear that we're specific around just the budget discussion items here. We already have a resolution on the books that we are going to have further discussions on exactly the points that Director Wilson had brought up. That's not the discussion that we're having today. We'll be having an analysis by staff so that we all have the same information and are working off the same material for making those future decisions. This is specifically around, we've got some items here. We're not going to be making broad policy decisions today. Staff need to have, I see your hand, Director Acton. Staff need to have direction on preparing the budget for the upcoming year. We're going to go round table and let everybody have a opportunity to speak their piece, and then we'll consider a resolution. So at this point, we are going to do an analysis and a review of what ones we want everybody to contemplate we should be sending to. That's not today. We will be doing that in the future. This is specifically for inclusion in the budget for 250 for the 2021 budget. I have right now on my speakers list Director Yanni DiNardo, Nicholson, and Acton. Is there anybody else that would like to be on that speakers list? Director Yanni DiNardo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to recommend that we reduce this budget by 25% and remain the same. I think that if we reduce too much, and we don't know what's going to be happening next year, and we don't know what's really in play, so it's best not to. And I think our Chair Stone kind of awakened me to a few things on that too, is by reducing it too much, then the following years we'll have to, it's a larger bump. So I would think that 25% is appropriate, and that's just my thought if you're going round table.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I think these conferences, I'm in the same, I think along the same lines as Director Wilson does on this. I think that these conferences are useful for networking and building relationships with other people. So certainly AVICC is really important. They also offer a good learning opportunity for people on issues that are coming up. And they're also probably most important for advancing issues or resolutions that we think need to be moved through the system. So in all cases, I think we need to have a presence. I think AVICC makes most sense for us to maintain that budget. UBCM, I believe we should be reducing it by 44% in terms of the registration cost line item and the travel cost line item. And in terms of FCM, I think we should be reducing it by 77% in terms of the registration to the conference and the travel to the conference. And I think if we did that for this coming year, it would prevent us having to having a grand fluctuation, because I believe that we probably will want to introduce policy that shows a little bit more fiscal restraint on these types of conferences, especially FCM and UBCM, where the travel expenses can be very high. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Director Acton.
Thank you, Director Morrison. I was on the same lines as Director Yanni DiNardo of I don't want to debate the merits of each line item. They all have their pros and their cons, and we all tap into them in different ways that benefit our communities. Either it's from personal development to travel expenses, I know, or being able to expense something that makes our jobs more easier and for us to do our jobs. So, and not to forget, we're all paying into this on a by population. So this is not as big a line item. And I don't want to be, if we cut it too much, as Chair Stone mentioned, then we're scrambling to try and bring it back up, and we're throwing this onto the new board, who they're actually going to be the ones that will need the training and some support for doing their roles. I really think that we may shoot ourselves in the foot here. So, and not to get down in the weeds of so much detail, I would really like to support just a sweep. And the 25% sounds reasonable over 2019's budget. If we reduce it by 5%, would support something like that.
Thank you, Director Acton. I've got myself on the list. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to this discussion? Okay, I've got Director Wilson. Please proceed, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I can understand that some people see more value in some of the conferences than others. I am concentrating on local. This is where we govern. This is where we know, and this is where we deal all the time. I heard a director mention personal development. We are not in this job for any personal development. We're here to help our communities, not to further our own ends. So from that point of view, I will support the local stuff. I'm not a great believer in the stuff 2,000 kilometers away. In my talks with finance, who I have a very, very high regard for, they did say that the 50% reduction would be a good figure to go for as far as recouping the losses, or if we have to. We don't even know if we're going to be going anywhere in 2021. And 50% is a good figure to go for. So I'm leaning towards what the financial people think is the best way forward. Thank you.
Okay, I see we've got people that want to speak again, so I'm going to jump in now and Director Smith next. So, this is a very interesting discussion, and in regards to the overall, policy that we want to have in place for various conferences. Once again, I'll repeat, it's not for debate today. I could make lots of arguments why FCM is a really good conference for a number of directors to go to, but that's not the argument for today. Today is we need to come up with a number on these various lines in 250. I know that there was some indication that it would be a good idea to cut some of the expenses for mileage, for instance, and some of us live a lot further away than others do, and I'm going to tell you that in the time that I've been a director, I've basically worn out 2 vehicles. And there's a lot of travel and a lot of work to be done now. Yes, we are in a COVID time, and I think a reduction of some of those costs are more than appropriate. So my inclination at this point is to avoid the sticker shock that has also been referred to by a couple of directors previously, of having to re-up this to a sustainable level in the future. The further we cut now, we're just going to have to bring some of those dollars back in the future after we've done that analysis in the policy review. So I'm kind of inclined to go with what I've heard from Director Yanni DiNardo and Director Acton. I think that it's going to show leadership in that we're reducing those expenses, and if they aren't expended, they will go into an operational reserve, and that's prudent to do as well. So with that, I'll conclude my comments. I will, this is just for general discussion now, and I've got Director Smith, then I have Acton and Yanni DiNardo. Is there anyone else that wants to weigh in on this before we go to a resolution? Director Acton again as well. Okay, Director Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with Director Wilson that the conferences, they're very important. The local ones, they give us an opportunity to make our job, be better at our jobs. We have a position. It's great to talk to other areas, but it's also the UBCM was, I found, even though it was virtual, was an extremely beneficial time that was spent sitting in my little tiny office glued to the screen, and it was really beneficial. I think that Director Yanni DiNardo also spent some time. But I think that those are very important. FCM is always an expensive one based on the distance, the cost involved. But I think that we made some really good decisions on some of the other items that are in this budget. But I do feel that we do need to fund those conferences that are local, and that we don't want to drop them to zero. And I would support 50% remaining within those budgets for those, and that we really have a good look at FCM and come up with a good policy on how we go forward with that particular conference. And that's what is the best financial use of resources and us as a group. But I think we need to report back. I think those are important parts of that. If you attend something, you need to come back with some information that's reported out. So I would support 50% back onto our budget for the conferences. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone, since we have a really long day, we have to come up with a number, and we're not discussing the merits. We already have a resolution that's gone through the board that we will do a review and an analysis of the merits of the various different conferences. I will go to Director Acton, Director Acton, Yanni DiNardo, and then Nicholson. Director Acton. Oh, pardon me. Hang on. Director Nicholson, have you spoken on this item yet? You have? Okay. Director Acton, please proceed.
I wanted to clarify my personal development. I was thinking more professional development. So items that can help us do our job, whether it's public speaking or conflict resolution, whatever. And Director Smith is correct. You do get a lot of that at conferences, or I think it was Director Smith. Anyway, but a few line items, and I don't want to focus on just those ones that we've cut a little too much. So I feel like if we just do, I like the 25%. If we do the 25%, and when I would like to have that as a resolution, we can field the committee if they're willing for that, because there's some other line items that we cut a little too much. So that would bring them back up, because we were getting a little overzealous, I think, at cutting.
Thank you, Director Acton. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hearing from the committee now. I'm willing to put a resolution on the floor now, and maybe I just throw this back to committee to reduce the budget by 30% then, and the rest remain. So I'm not sure if that's because it'll, that's not the 50, it's not the 25, but I just think that 50 is too much, and I'm more satisfied with the 25, but I would go to 30. I just think that it's not necessary to go down to 50.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. I thank you for reading the room, and we could test a couple of resolutions. I'm going to go to Director Nicholson next, and I will come back to Director Yanni DiNardo after. So Director Nicholson, please proceed.
I am finding it a little bit challenging with this blanket percentage on what that means for this function overall. But that said, I think that this is a particular function that we can afford to use a very sharp pencil on. And when I think about some of the financial pressures we have on electoral area services business, particularly things like this harmonization, modernization project by law enforcement, we haven't seen those budgets yet, and I'm thinking that we really should be making as much room as possible for those things, because we have 2 years left, I think, to make a difference in moving our programs forward. And this may be an opportunity, given that we probably won't be doing that much travel next year, to really tighten our belts on this function.
So I'm going to go to Ms. Soldera next. You've been patiently waiting here, and you've heard some of the discussion. You've had some comments attributed to you. Do you have anything that you could add to the discussion before I go to a resolution?
I do not. I'm happy to run some numbers based on the decision made today, and we will definitely be bringing back this budget for further discussion and reconsideration during budget deliberations as well. So there is opportunity to make further adjustments should the committee and the board be unhappy with the final results.
So there's been lots of hands go up in the air. I committed I would come back to Director Yanni DiNardo. We can test the House with a couple of different resolutions. I'll go to Director Yanni DiNardo. Would you like to make a resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the resolution that reduce the budget by 30% and the rest remains the same.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion? Director Kuhn.
I will not support this resolution because I'm in favor of a bigger cut than 30%. I would be in favor of 50%. Thank you.
Director Smith.
So I'm just looking for some clarification. I thought at the last meeting when we went through this budget line by line, the end result was a 13% reduction in the whole 250. So I just am asking, I know we're in the middle of but I'd like clarification, because if we're talking 30%, we're even over more than what we were originally. So can I please have clarification?
Let's go to Ms. Soldera, and I think for clarification purposes, and we'll hear what she has to say, but I think that it was the budgets that were reduced from their 2020 numbers to zero. I think that's 100% reduction. I think the intent of the resolution was to not reduce it to 100% reduction, just a 25% reduction. Was that the intent, Director Yanni DiNardo? She's nodding her head yes. Ms. Soldera, can you provide us with some clarification?
That was just going to be my suggestion as well, that the clarification to the recommendation be that the budgets for FCM, UBCM, and AVICC expenditures, that the lines within those budgets be reduced by 30%, just for clarification, 30%. Not the entire 250 budget.
Yeah. Does that help? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, 30% seems, I'm happy that Director Yanni DiNardo has brought this down. I'm still aiming at 50% because I don't know if anybody else has actually added these numbers up. It's $154,154 in this whole 250. That's a huge amount of money for travel and all the rest of it that we use. So a reduction of 30% brings it down to 108,000, which is still a huge amount of money. Bringing it down by 50% brings it down to 77,000 that we're going to put away. So I can't support the 30%, and I'm still looking for 50% to bring it down to 77,000. Thank you.
Thank you. And just remind everyone that regardless of what numbers that we put in the budget and what we do around our policy, we can't in any way bind the future board as to what they choose to do around travel and that sort of thing. So no any further discussion on the resolution that's before us now. Director Nicholson.
Well, I would like clarification. So is this percentage only about the conferences, or is it also include the other two things that are in the recommendation thing? I'm sorry, I've lost my papers here. If you look at the recommendations that were in the on the agenda.
Ms. Soldera, can you help us out on this?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, there's the items for community information, as well as the reduction of electoral area services to reduce conferences and seminars general expenditures from 15,000 to 5,000. So I think those items are still being left on. It was only for the ones that were specified by Ms. Soldera.
So could I have clarification from whoever made the motion that 30% was only about the conferences, the other ones would stand, the reductions that we've got from 57 to 15,000?
Correct.
We have an affirmative response on that. Director Wilson.
Yeah, sorry about that. I missed out that 57,000. The actual full total is 211,000, nearly $250,000 that we're spending on general expenditures and travel. It's too much. It's much too much. In these days, much too much. I'm sorry, 50% overall on all those figures there.
Director Acton.
So I would also like to clarify on the line item travel. I believe that line item is for mileage expenses. And are we talking about that one right now? That one was significantly reduced, and looking back at our patterns, it tends to be around $15,000.
Ms. Soldera, do you have any? I think the resolution is just about the travel right now. We could revisit that after we consider the
conferences.
Yes, we're just considering the conferences at this point.
And that other travel line item is actually mileage.
Yes. So we have a resolution to reduce the conferences, line items, the travel, the registration, all of those things by 30% is the resolution that's on the floor. I don't see any further hands up in the air at this point, so I am going to test the House and call the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? The motion's defeated. So next resolution, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a resolution that we reduce all of those items all the way in that recommendation 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which come to a total of, if my math is correct, $211,000 by 50% overall, which would bring it down to about $105,000, which is a lot of money.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Kuhn. So, just so that we're clear, that would ultimately bring the mileage one up by $2,500 to 50% of what was taxed in 2020, and because that was reduced from 15 to 5. So are you, just for clarity purposes, Ms. Soldera, if we were to reduce all of those line items from the previously taxed level by 50%, would that not be the impact that that would have on that item, the mileage and the other?
Just looking at my travel expense, the travel expense was reduced to $5,000, so it was reduced by 50%. It would add another $2,500.
That's what I understood. Director, did we had a seconder from Director Kuhn, Director Acton?
Well, so we're talking about that one now, but we weren't before. I think that one should be handled separately. That is actually something that we consistently expense, driving for our communities and coming to meetings, and that could very easily go back to normal.
Well, the resolution that was put by Director Wilson and seconded by Director Kuhn still limits that mileage total to $7,500. So
are you sure?
That's the resolution on the floor. So I have Ms. Wayner wanting to wade in, and then Director Yanni DiNardo.
Through the chair to Director Acton, that line for the $15,000 is actually for the general conferences for their area directors. There's a policy for $500 per person that can attend. It's not just mileage. Travel for the mileage, that's one was cut at a different time. So if you look at the budget, there's $15,000 in for general conferences as per the policy.
Okay, so then my question would be, what do we know what directors usually expense for mileage? Because we have to ensure that's in there. Like, you know, I don't expect anyone to be paying their mileage, and I certainly hope that no one would have expected me, especially my first year when 100% of my pay was going to a sitter.
I've got Director Yanni DiNardo next and Director Wilson. Director Yanni DiNardo, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking again, if things do go back to normal, and I was thinking of Director Nicholson's comment on the OCP and the harmonization and all of that, and to be able to travel to that if we're now opening to public and public consultation, and if we go back to normal, I think we're really hamstringing ourselves with this resolution. So, because we're not sure, and then once it does get back to normal, then the following year, we're going to be bumping it up a lot. So I think we should be reasonable here. And I am very frugal. I try to be. And I think this is just pushing it a little too far.
I had no one after Director Yanni DiNardo. Is anyone else? Director Wilson, go ahead.
Yeah, you did have me on the list. You said you would. I don't know about this mileage thing. I haven't claimed any mileage since March. what's all this we're talking about mileage here? I don't understand what's going on.
Ms. Soldera, can you assist us with that?
So there is a budget line for mileage. Directors are able to put in a claim for mileage for coming to board meetings, committee meetings, and other meetings. There's a policy with respect to the mileage claims that directors are allowed to put forward.
Follow up, please. Well, in that case, I mean, I've not been to any. I've been on WebEx all the time. I came into the office last Wednesday, first time in 2 or 3 months. I'll swallow that. That's only, you know, that's not a big deal. But I don't understand why we're talking about.
Director Smith.
So just for clarification, are we talking when we go down the line to that word travel that's above telephone? Is that the because we reduced that to 5,000, and you're saying that that travel amount is when we travel from our home to the office or where we travel and we claim our mileage? So that travel is our mileage. And this year, most directors are not traveling back and forth, other than the ones like Director Morrison and myself who have internet issues. So we are unfortunately charging mileage. Okay, but next year we may be needing mileage, and we may be needing it for, as Director Yanni DiNardo indicated, we would be for our MOCP, our HOCP. We have a lot more meetings that may happen, or they may be virtual. So it's an unknown. So if we go down to the 5,000, considering looking at 2017 and 18 and 19, 5,000 might be a little low, but maybe Ms. Soldera would have a better idea of where we would be better positioned in that regard.
So I've got the next speakers. I'm going to go to Director Kuhn next and Director Yanni DiNardo, and I think we're sort of closing in on something that might be reasonable, and I'm getting a sense from reading the room that we may need to possibly amend the resolution just to deal with that mileage issue. But I'll go to Director Kuhn, then Director Yanni DiNardo, and I may have a suggestion. Director Kuhn.
Yes, I would suggest then, all right, if that is a concern, and I can see that concern actually, why don't we exempt the 15,000 then from the reduction? And that's all we'd have to do, and leave the reduction at 50%, but exempt the 15.
Would you make a motion to that effect?
Yes, I'd like to.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Wilson. Okay, we have an amendment to the resolution that will restore the mileage funding to $15,000. Is there any need for discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. Director Yanni DiNardo on the main motion as amended.
I'll pass.
Director Smith on the main motion as amended.
Yeah, so I'd just like some clarification. Are the community information, we reduced that to 15,000. Is that where it's staying, or is there some other reduction or something else happening with that line? Or is it just the conferences now that are going to 50%? The community information is still going to stay at 15,000. Is that correct?
Well, I think we need to go back to the mover, because I think he listed all the items at a 50% level, and then we've just amended it on the mileage. So I'm getting nodding all around the room that's what the resolution states. Okay, I think we have clarification. I think we have a resolution that's been amended. It's been duly moved and seconded. All those in favor? Or any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, one opposed. Motion carries. We have now dealt with R11.
Excuse me, I think Ms. Soldera had something to add.
Okay,
Did we miss her?
I just looked down. We had a resolution on the floor. Did you need to provide any further clarification, Ms. Soldera? She's nodding no.
I was just looking for a little clarification, Chair. I was, but I can get the full resolution from Ms. Harrison after the meeting. So.
Thank you. We've now dealt with R11 or no, that was R12, pardon me. Ms. Harrison, where are we? We're now down to R13, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair, but I'm not sure if you want to entertain a reorder of the agenda.
Oh, you're a mind reader, Ms. Harrison. Under the chair's prerogative, we're going to pull number 9, unfinished business. We'll deal with that item, and then we'll have a quick break, and then we'll go to R13. So we'll now bring number 9, unfinished business forward, and it's in regards to Saltair Water Service requisition, and we should have a staff person addressing that, I believe. Who do we have? Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item was was referred back to staff for some clarification. And so we've gone back and done our research and determined that it is legally possible to include a sunset clause on a requisition limit within an establishing bylaw. It is a bit challenging from an administrative perspective, and I've outlined the reasoning in the staff report. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Any questions for Ms. Legault? Hang on, I just got to pull up. No hands up. And so hang on, I just got to pull up the resolution here. My apologies. Okay, so we have direction. This is a 4-direction resolution. Where are we as far as options go? This is Director Smith. So Director Smith, what's your pleasure?
Thank you very much. Option 3, resolution that it be recommended to the board that CVRD bylaw number 2178, Saltair Water System Service Establishment bylaw 2001 be amended to increase the maximum annual requisition limit from 490,000 to 720,000 and include provisions to reduce the limit by 300,000 effective December 31st, 2027.
Are you moving that? Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion on the item? Well, I'm going to jump into this one. I'll go first. Then I've got Director Acton. So firstly, I just wanted to clarify a little bit about some of our processes that we use. And I haven't used an AAP in my community. I've used petition, or petition has been used. And I just want to make it very clear to everyone that is looking at a consent item for taxation, that it's not the CVRD's petition. The community petitions the CVRD to tax. So we didn't do anything wrong in any petitions that I participated in, because the community will get a question, go door to door, talk to the people in the community, and have petitions signed that ultimately form a document where they come forward and request that the community be taxed. I see your hand up, Director Smith. So a petition is an excellent way to gauge the community's desire to participate in upgrades to a water system, a sewer system, a lighting system, or whatever. But I've just noted in a lot of the correspondence that we received today that there seems to be a reference to the CVRD's petition process and what was said by the CVRD to the community. And I know for a fact that when the petitions that have happened in my area have been done, that as the CVRD director, I had nothing to do with them. The community went out and polled itself and signed the petitions to have them taxed for the service improvements that they desire. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's very clear about that the CVRD didn't go out and sell, especially via petition, the notion that we were going to do taxation. This is the community making a positive, proactive application to the regional district to tax them for improvements. And I want to make that distinction because AAPs are not very well liked. When we have a referendum, they're very expensive. And I've used, our community has used petition on a couple of occasions in my area to have taxation done for specific projects. And a second part, I just want to remind everyone that I understand Director Smith's desire to have this sunset clause, but I checked with staff beforehand, and this would be the only sunset clause that we would have in any of the 180 functions. And you know, I wonder, is there merit in doing that? And I bring that question forward for this reason. I've had to go back to my community when a debt has been retired. And I've gone back to the community, and it's an excellent time to engage with community on the operation and the function of their services, because there is now this dollar amount that's been taxed every year. And you can go to your community and say, okay, folks, look at this. We've retired the debt. The MFA monies were expended and the project's now paid for. Now we can look with staff's help at the general condition and overall circumstances of whatever the service is and say, as your director, I can petition the board, or I can ask the board to reduce the taxation for this function by X amount. And we all have that ability to do each and every budget year. But what the response that I've had from community when we have these discussions is, well, hang on, when it comes to park, we know that park playground equipment is going to need to be replaced at some time, or we know we have to make investments in this asset or that asset. Now, there's two ways of doing it, and one is for there to be a continued taxation at whatever level the community recommends to the director, and the director with staff to the board to continue. But if you put the sunset clause in, and that flexibility, and we go into the eyes wide open, that flexibility will then have to be, you'll have to go back to another consent process if you choose to need to invest in other assets that the community uses. So I'm just wanting everybody to be very clear that if we support moving to a sunset clause on this one item, we can certainly do so, but this will incur costs at a later date unless perhaps a petition system is used to gain consent for other works that may be done within that service. So it's, you know, I've given this a lot of thought. I've done these in my own community. When I've gone back and engaged with the community on those tax dollars after a debt's been retired, the overwhelming response that I get from community members is, you know, we've paid that debt off. Now we should be looking at what other assets need to be enhanced, improved, that sort of thing. So I put that on the table for everyone to consider. If Director Smith wants to proceed with this, it may encumber future directors to have to go and seek consent again. It's strictly up to her and whatever this committee decides to recommend to the board. I had Director Acton next.
Well, so I think you summed up some of it, but I wanted to hear from staff what the implications are and what exactly, and maybe for Director Smith to speak of it as well, what she's trying to accomplish here, and has she tried to work with staff to get that goal recognized?
So I've got Director Smith. I've also got Director Wilson. So we'll go to Director Wilson, then Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would prefer to hear Director Smith first. She had her hand up before me.
Oh, sorry. Director Smith, go ahead.
That's the petition that the CVRD staff came to the community and they stood in front of the community and they stated that $4.5 million over 15 years, and that the cheapest way to do this was a local government act petition as a way of taxpayers' assent. People signed it in good faith, that it was indicating that they understand that they're going to increase their taxation for a period of up to 15 years. If staff comes and stands in front of your community and tells them this, they give them a document that is under the Local Government Act, stating that it's a legal petition for assent. If they stand in front of your community and then later it is shuffled under the carpet that they can continue forever and ever, they need to come back to your community after 15 years, because that's what the staff told everybody at that meeting. That people asked, what happens at the end of 15 years? And they said, we will come back to the community with projects that will be indicated, the costs. This came with a full set of documents showing what projects would be done with the $4.5 million over 15 years. If we cannot trust the governance that we put in place for the community, then they don't have any trust in us. And it's all our communities. If we have staff standing in front of the community making these statements, we have people going door to door in good faith, then we need a sunset clause. I have talked to the inspector of municipalities in the past regarding this petition. If you want to go beyond 15 years, the community can actually sue you. So we need to be very respectful of our taxpayers in our community. And the sunset clause is the only way that we're actually going to reflect what was said. If this was the wrong way to go, it wasn't the community's idea. And so we need to make sure that we're actually respecting what we put in front of a community. And if you think that the community won't go nuts if we don't get that sunset clause in there, you're looking at a $3.7 million loan that we are asking them to authorize for a filtration system. If you won't honor a petition with a sunset clause, we're going to be in a mess. So I really ask that you support option 3, because if this is how we treat our people in our communities, then we're not doing good governance. So we need to put that clause in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. I have Director Wilson, Kuhn, and did I see another hand up a moment ago? Director Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully expect that any director that comes to this board with the amount of research that has been put into this has done it with the best of intentions. I'm the same. I put in a report which was 10 pages long and then God knows how many, oh, pardon me, and quite a few attachments as well. I did my research. I expect that research to be respected. I did not come to this board to hear somebody then lecture this board on what should or should not have been done. This is not a point of order here, but it is a point of contention that you would stand up there and lecture us on what we should or should not do. That, to me, is not allowed. Thank you.
Well, I'm really sorry that you found that I was lecturing you on this issue. I'm relating the experience that I've had in working with staff in going to my community.
Point of order, we have a motion
what's
on
your
the
point
floor.
of order?
And the point of order is that that I did feel like we were being lectured. I think that we are here to make a decision today about a sunset clause. And yes, I know that you have past experience, but I think that we have a motion on the floor and you aren't exactly speaking to the motion on the floor. So point of order.
So your point is that I'm not speaking. So is it fair that in that exercise that I should be able to, if you're calling me on that, I should be able to call the rest of us on that? Fair enough. Director Kuhn.
There's something I don't quite understand about this whole discussion here. Are we at a stage now where we take for granted that the community cannot trust the CVRD? Is that what this is all about? Because I have a real problem with that. Does the community, in some cases, like in this particular case, would that community take for granted that if the $3.5 million is paid, the loan is paid back, that the CVRD would just keep charging? I mean, what are we talking about here? Do we not trust local government anymore ourselves, because we are the ones that will make the decisions? So the contract says it's a $3.5 million loan. It's paid back. Now what? Now we just is that what the suspicion is? Oh well, they'll just keep charging, and because there's no sunset clause. I find that such nonsense. I don't know where this is all coming from. Please, somebody explain that to me, because I don't understand it.
Director Smith, to the resolution.
Yes, the sunset clause is in regards to a 2012 agreement between the CVRD and the community for $4.5 million over 15 years that are collected in a phase of $300,000 per year to go into the Saltair distribution system. That's what the sunset clause is about. It is to ensure that at the end of 15 years, the $300,000 per year is no longer collected. If the CVRD water department requires additional funding for additional projects, they can come back to the community, and the community at that time will make a decision on the funding. It is not about the $3.7 million loan. Thank you.
Director Kuhn.
Yes, but it deals with the point that I'm making. So we're in effect, the community is suspicious of the CVRD keeping charging after the $300,000 a year is paid, and the $4.5 million is paid back. So now we're at zero, and now the suspicion is, oh well, they'll keep charging us. Where does that come from? I mean, I cannot imagine that our department would go ahead and say, oh, well, you know, they've paid their own back. Let's just keep charging them for other things. I don't think that is even possible. It would be then up to the board. So I have trouble when there's the suspicion put forward that we can't trust each other. That really troubles me. Because if that is at the base, well, what are we doing here? We cannot possibly go ahead and function as a group when we don't trust each other. I cannot agree with that.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Smith, and I've got myself on the list.
Yes, the sunset clause will definitely ensure that at the end of 2027 that the collection, it's not for a loan. There was no loan involved. It is only a taxation that is put towards yearly the distribution system. It is not a loan. Nobody's going to collect beyond that due to a loan. This is to make sure that in 2027, the agreement is not forgotten, that you and I most likely will not be here in another 7 years. Staff will come and go. We need to make sure that this is put down on paper within the bylaw to ensure that we make no mistakes and additionally collect, or that we have shown the community that a decision that was brought to them by the CVRD staff in 2011 and 2012 will ensure that it goes only as far as 2027. That's what the clause will do. It will bring assurances to the community that it's written in a document. And that's what we're asking for with the sunset clause.
Director Kuhn?
Well, as it was mentioned earlier, this would be the first time that we install a sunset clause. In previous agreements, I presume with other areas, it was never done. And I cannot see really the justification for it. I cannot see how the CVRD would just keep charging that money, even though now the 15 years has passed or whatever, and the matter is settled. My problem with that is this: if we insist that we put clauses into contracts just on the suspicion that if one of us isn't there anymore, or if a new director is there, and we take for granted, well, because the new director is there now, the CVRD administration, maybe they miss something too, and they'll just keep charging. I have a problem with expressing distrust, and I'm really big on that, because I feel we have to be able to trust each other. We have to be able to trust our staff. If we end up dickering with trust, we're on a slippery slope. And then you're going to get contracts over contracts over contracts because we don't trust each other anymore. And I have an aversion to that.
Director Smith to close. Oh, Director Acton. Go ahead, Director Smith.
Well, I was hoping that staff would pop in at some point, because I thought my question, like, does staff have any objections to this clause being in there, since we haven't done it before?
I think it's contained in the report, but Ms. Legault, please.
Thank you, through the chair. You know, this is really the will of the board. It's not my recommendation to include it in the bylaw. Part of the challenge to me is the way the limit has to be expressed according to the legislation. So it's not as simple as saying decrease by $300,000 as of this date. You have to put a hard number in. So that means we have to track every time there's any kind of a change, or, you know, budgets, work plans, those sorts of things, and make sure that we're always in alignment, because it will be, you know, if the requisition limit will have to be expressed as a specific number and not to decrease by $300,000. So there's some tracking and some risk involved in that, and so that is why it was not the staff recommendation. However, it is the will of the board to make this decision.
Mr. Kieber. And I've got you, Director Smith, to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, to be fair, Ms. Legault basically explained what I was going to say. At the end of the day, if the board wants to put a limit on, they can do it. The board has the choice at any point in time during the budget deliberations, not to increase the parcel tax, to not charge a certain fee. Eagle Heights sewer system hasn't charged a parcel tax for probably 20 years because the project was completed and no longer taxed. So you can do that. If you want to handcuff future boards down the road, you can do that. At the end of the day, those bylaws will need to be amended in the future. Staff is just making recommendations not to handcuff them, but by all means, if the board chooses to go forward and adopt option 3, we can function. It'll happen. Saltair water system will continue to function for the next foreseeable years. It'll just be difficult to manage that later as we get closer to 2027.
Thank you, Mr. Keever. Director Smith to close.
Yes, I'd like to remind everyone that it says in the staff report that a sunset clause requisition limit is legally possible, and that it is a Saltair function. It is taxed and funded only by Saltair taxpayers, and I believe that this is the best solution for what has been going on for a few years, and I think that we need to support option number 3, and I ask for support for option number 3. It is the Saltair water system. It is funded only by Saltair taxpayers, and a sunset clause is legal. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. Oh, we had the resolution read out, I believe. Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we did not. It was simply the option number 3. That option number 3.
Okay, well, I think it should be read out, and the option number 3, according to that it be recommended to the board that bylaw number 2178, Saltair Water System Service Establishment Bylaw 2001 be amended to increase the maximum annual requisition limit, from 490,000 to 720,000, and include provisions to reduce the limit by 300,000 effective December 31st, 2027. Is that the resolution that you've moved and seconded, Director Smith? I will now call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Now we will take a brief break until, does anybody need more than 10 minutes? We got a long one coming up. I've had requests for more than 10 minutes, so why don't we make it, it's 4:35, 4:50. And I think for the purposes of this, Coralie had asked that she have the opportunity to make her presentation, and then we can pose questions at the end. Is that your preferred way of going about it? I see directors are nodding yes, so. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity today so that myself and Rob Grant and Alison Garnett can speak to you about bylaw 4270, the official community plan for the electoral areas, bylaw 4329, the bylaw revision bylaw, and bylaw 4330, the zoning consistency bylaw. We anticipate it'll be about a 40 to 45 minute presentation, and we do have some videos along the way, and I'm going to ask Rob Grant, who's controlling the presentation, to move us to the first slide. I'm using my hand today to Rob to move to the second slide. I'll just wait until, okay, there we go. So we just thought we'd start today with a little bit of a refresher of the journey from harmonization to modernization. This replaces the requested workshop that the directors requested on September 16th. But it's shortened, obviously, because that workshop would have been a couple of hours. And we're just going to start off by showing you the video that was played in the open houses that explained to the public what we were doing in the movie theaters. And we had a really good response to this short, it's about 3.5 minute video. So we thought we'd play it again to just refresh all the directors as well.
The Cowichan Valley Regional District is in the process of harmonizing and modernizing its plans. So what is that all about? Well, let's start here with a map of the Cowichan Valley. As you can see, we have a big region with many communities. You of course have the incorporated municipalities of Duncan, North Cowichan, Ladysmith, and Lake Cowichan. But in addition to those municipalities, you have communities such as Yubo, Cobble Hill, Cowichan Bay, Mill Bay, Honeymoon Bay, Saltaire, Shawnigan Lake, and North Oyster. These communities are in one of 9 electoral areas governed by the Cowichan Valley Regional District, and that's who this harmonized and modernized plan is for. You see, our region as a whole is facing a number of current and future challenges. Another 5,000 people are expected to move here in the next 30 years. In the midst of all that, we're seeing less affordable housing, inconsistencies in our water supply, sea level rise, a transitioning economy, and much more. These are issues that we have to respond to quickly and issues that we can't take on alone. So what are we doing about it? Well, we're starting with these. There are no less than 7 official community plans and 8 different zoning bylaws for Cowichan Valley's 9 electoral areas. And these documents guide key decisions on the future of these areas. Where do we build more housing? Check these documents. How do we keep people in places safe from flooding? Check these documents. What kind of jobs do we want to encourage here? Check these documents. The challenge here? There's just too much. Nearly 2,000 pages of planning documents for an area covering about 37,000 people. Now, most of those pages are kind of repetitive. Each electoral area has policies and regulations around protecting the environment and new development, for example. But multiply that by 9 electoral areas, and all of a sudden, you've got a lot of pages essentially addressing the same thing. But there's just enough inconsistency to make this tricky. For example, if you wanted to build a secondary suite in your home, how big your suite is allowed to be can vary from 74 square meters in area I to 95 square meters in area F. It's like having to carry around 8 different dictionaries to speak the same language. Managing all these documents makes decision-making very inefficient, which, aside from being incredibly expensive, is slowing down our ability to adapt to change as a region now. Addressing this is a 2-step process. The first step, harmonization. No, not that. What we're doing is bringing our many OCPs into a single official community plan. In doing so, we are standardizing information and creating more clarity, consistency, flexibility, and certainty to ensure efficient and cost-effective decision-making and fair outcomes. This time saved will create opportunities to innovate and better address the pressing issues of our time. At the same time, we're including 9 local area plans within this one document to make sure that we're considering the unique qualities and issues in each electoral area. That puts us in a great position for the next step, modernization, how we update our policies to address our changing future and to make us a more sustainable and resilient region. Maybe we want to encourage more farm-to-table businesses like wineries, cideries, and breweries that are bringing new jobs to our region. Well, we can update our policies to do that. But this time, instead of updating all of these, we just need to update one OCP. And this is where we could really use your help. The CVRD is currently requesting the public's input on the draft harmonized OCP and how to modernize it. To learn more, check out our website, cvrd.bc.ca/regionalOCP. At the end of the day, CVRD is a mosaic of diverse communities, each with qualities that make their own unique contribution to our region. And the idea behind harmonization and modernization is that our region is more resilient and sustainable to change when we work together.
Thank you, Rob. So now what we're going to do is just give a very brief overview of what an OCP is supposed to be, and then we'll talk about just some of the process and journey that we had in terms of moving from the 7 electoral area OCPs to this draft OCP today, and something that we refer to in community planning as the planning bylaw DNA of the organization. Next slide, please. So an overview, I'm not going to read everything on the slides. This can be provided to you afterwards, but I will just touch on what, and as a reminder, refresher for the directors, the legal requirements, the possibilities and the constraints within the OCP. Just again, what can be stated within policies and the land use designations, which are the main core pieces of the OCP. And now we're going to show you a very brief, it's under 2 minutes, video on what is an OCP. This was also playing at the open houses, and it's on the website now and Community Planning and Development Services.
Why is this park here and not there? Why does this trail exist? How about those houses? Who decided they should go there? Or that this farm should go here? And where are things going in the future? Well, to find the answers to questions like these and more, you can turn to this, the Official Community Plan, or OCP for short. It's a document that guides how the Cowichan Valley's electoral areas evolve and develop in the future. So how does well, the OCP starts with a vision and goals. It tries to answer the important questions, like where do the next 5,000 people live? How do we provide good jobs in our region? And how do we adapt to more extreme weather resulting from climate change? The resulting goals include things like manage growth holistically, protect water quality and quantity, or strengthen our food and agricultural systems for food security. From there, the OCP lays out objectives and policies to achieve these goals. For example, let's take the goal strengthen our food and agricultural systems for food security. To achieve that goal, we've written objectives such as preserve and protect agricultural land for agricultural purposes and increase residents growing food. We've also written policies supporting new technologies being used in our agriculture to make it more viable and sustainable. All this establishes our intentions for what we want for our area. From there, we set regulations, such as the zoning bylaw, to get into the finer details and implement these goals. If you're a real keener, we've made another video on this topic. There's another important part of an OCP, land designation. There are certain goals that are different depending on location. Coastal lands might have different considerations from agricultural lands. Rural neighborhoods need different policies compared to commercial areas, and some areas will be far more suitable for new development than others. So with that in mind, the OCP sorts all the lands in the electoral areas into categories of designations such as residential, commercial, parks, and agricultural. Each one of those designations will have their own policies, which will then be reinforced with zoning regulations. At the end of the day, an OCP addresses the big challenges a community or region faces and allows us to coordinate our efforts and investment. And that really pays off. For example, the many multi-use trails we have in the Cowichan Valley are in large part due to policies in our OCP that called for these trails to be built. And that's just scratching the surface. There is a lot going on in this document, so maybe check it out sometime. It makes for great bedside reading material. Most importantly, the Official Community Plan is a living document that gets updated from time to time to make sure it continues to reflect public interests and the values of the community. With that in mind, the Cowichan Valley Regional District is asking for your input as it modernizes its Official Community Plan. To learn more, check out our website, www.cvrd.bc.ca.
So legal requirements. Again, a reminder to everyone that there must be statements of objectives and policy. So this is what the Act tells us must be requirements in terms of the OCP, and map designations respecting various types of land use. There are requirements on residential information, location, amount, type, density sufficient for a 5-year minimum. The information that we're now collecting for the housing needs assessment will be supporting the modernized OCP in this regard. Other information on specific designations. We'll talk about the designations in a minute, but commercial is an example. It must include restrictions on the use of hazard lands, and of course, major road, sewer, and water systems, public facilities, affordable housing, greenhouse gas emission targets, and sand and gravel deposits. But then we have possibilities. So the Act also provides for the legal possibilities, broad objectives for matters not within the regional district jurisdiction. You'll see in many of the local plans and in the main plan items that were policies or in current OCPs are now objectives for that reason. Policies for maintenance, enhancement of farming, policies for preservation, protection, restoration of natural environment, policies relating to social needs. And the other is development permit areas, which although their possibilities are not required, we have them. Temporary use permit areas are in local area plans. Development approval information areas, all the electoral areas are within development approval information areas, and heritage conservation areas, and then the local plans, of which we have 9. There are constraints, CVRD territory only. There are jurisdictional constraints. Any designations for hazard lands have to be based factually, usually with a report. We cannot contemplate non-farm use on ALR land and cannot.
Excuse me, Coraline, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This seems to be...
We're going to hold our questions to the end, or we're going to be...
Well, no, just a second, please. This seems to be a longer process, and I have a bit of a beef with this. Why do we have that after 4 or 5 hours of session now, when we're all tired, and now we're going to have to make decisions on this fairly complex deal here? Why don't we have a separate day where we deal with this alone? There's nothing else, and we are fresh.
We tried to do that, and directors could not come together to meet on one day to have a workshop.
Well, then we should. Well, then maybe we should try it again. I guess I get kind of antsy when it gets long, and I've heard other directors complain about that when we have a long session, and then at the end of the long session comes presentation and making decisions again. We're all tired. It's not the right thing to do, and I really protest against this.
Director Kuhn, I absolutely hear what you're saying, and every effort was put forward in polling of the directors to get them to come in to do this workshop, and we couldn't get more than 4 or 5 directors to all agree to come in to have a workshop on this.
Then let's make another effort. I just can't see sitting here now for another hour and a half or whatever, trying to make a decision on this. I find it's just not right. We should have a separate session on the OCP, and then we're all fresh. We can deal with it. And I'm just not.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order. Yeah, we've been working on this for a long time. I think, Director Kuhn, you need to have some dinner, maybe while you're listening to this. Because
that's maybe what it is too, but
it is important that we hear this through, and we've tried over and over again, and we know that these sessions are going to be long, so we have to accommodate it from our end. So I disagree with you completely.
I knew this was going to be a challenge, and it was going to be difficult if we put this at the beginning of the meeting or if we put it at the end of the meeting. And we're in this position now because we couldn't get all 9 directors to come together to meet on a day in which this could be presented. So much as Director Yanni DiNardo had said, we may not have to make a decision today, but we should hear the information, write down our questions, and be prepared to engage in this. A lot of time and effort has gone into the preparing for this presentation to be done. So I beg your indulgence, Director Kuhn and everyone else. It has been a long day. We've covered a lot of ground. Coralie, please proceed.
Thank you. So policies, it's just a refresher here on what they are, the difference between policies and on regulations, the function of the elected directors of making policies, not staff. I'll just, Rob. The capacity in policymaking between flexibility and certainty, and when a policy can in fact have both. And just an example here for everyone where there's some certainty in terms of a range, but there's also some flexibility as well. Next slide, please. The land use designations, very important. Those that are mandatory, and the ones that are mandatory, well, all designations within the OCP must have two components, text and a map. That's where our very capable people in GIS come in, and Rob will be talking about that in a minute. And something that we're going to look at more in the MOCP, will be coming back to you for decisions on things like where do we want area boundaries to be hard and where do we want them to be soft. And an example of that might be residential adjacent to commercial designations, and identifying a certain range, maybe up to 100 meters or some type of marker such as that, where when a request comes in for rezoning, we don't have to come back to the directors seeking an OCP amendment. There's that flexibility that's built into the OCP going forward. That's just one example, but those are the types of things. So the process to harmonization. Next one, Rob, please. Okay, I'm going to talk now about the first three schedules. Schedule A, the official community plan for the electoral areas. Schedule B, the local area plans. And Schedule C, the development permit areas. And a bit of a high-level overview on the process. So the official community plan, and here if we go back to that image of the DNA genome at the beginning of this, our current OCPs have kind of mutated quite a bit from their original adoption. And so not only were we looking at removing ultra-virus policies and zoning regulations within the OCPs, we also eliminated literally hundreds of duplicate and triplicate objectives and policies. And they're cross-referenced if anyone would like to see that, but we do have all of them cross-referenced in Excel sheets. And we tried to provide greater clarity, consistency, and also we've included departmental updates where appropriate from environment, for example, and engineering on items such as liquid waste management plan or growth containment boundary changes. And as I mentioned just a few moments ago, we've made sure that policies that were outside of the CVRD jurisdiction have now become objectives, which are matters of opinions, and the policies are within jurisdiction. That's Schedule A. Schedule B are the local area plans, and they permit a much more intense community consultation, and most of your APC, all of them, APCs have considered these at more depth. And they have more granular land use designations, the sub-designations, and they do include the temporary use permit area designations and guidelines. Schedule C are the development permit areas that have gone from 44 to 12. The logic behind the sequence of the development permit areas is following the ACT categories. We separated, in many cases, development permit areas that may have had 5 or 6 different justifications under the ACT, but in some cases might have only had guidelines that were associated with one justification. So you'll find a lot of simplicity and it will be easier to follow, and hopefully easier to amend when we're adding a new development permit area for a lot. It can just be included in an existing development permit area instead of brand new development permit area. And we've also included bylaw 4329 in the staff report package, which is a bylaw revision bylaw that will, should this be adopted, allow us in the future to move the guidelines, not the designation, that will be retained in the OCP, into the zoning bylaw. So, for example, something like form and character would then be those guidelines would be included in the appropriate zones. So next slide, please. Part of the process that we went through in the development permit area analysis is we were looking at guidelines that were weak, that were just so broad, they were hard to understand how an applicant would know how to be compliant, let alone the staff assessing that. Ultra-virus guidelines that were overreaching and unenforceable. Some of the DPs were almost mini little zoning bylaws unto themselves. So removing those types of items, putting them into the zoning bylaws. And we did reduce literally a lot of redundancy in the DPs to the extent of hundreds of pages of duplicate guidelines. In the modernization, the guidelines will become even more specific and clear. They will be within the CVRD jurisdiction, filtered for the toolbox context, and more concise and consistent. So they may be reduced from, in some cases, 20 guidelines down to 10, but they will be applicable and understandable. A little bit more on process, and as we move into the modernization, this is kind of part of the decision-making tree that wasn't just relative to the DPAs, but to the OCP process as well. So, we asked ourselves this as we went through: can you measure it? If yes, put it in a relevant bylaw, and if no, keep it as a guideline. Or where does it go? So now Rob is going to talk about the remaining schedules, which are all map schedules. And over to you, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Coralie. Just to speak on the text side of the OCP is the map schedules, and we have 13 map schedules, and within those 13 map schedules there are 350 maps. Nothing about the harmonization of the OCP has been straightforward. The only way that we were able to provide good mapping for Coralie's text is that she immersed us in the project from the get-go. From decoding bylaw text in order to create maps where no maps existed, and fixing consistency issues between text and maps, and map to map are just a few examples of what we were doing. So in order to work your way through the schedules, where it made sense, the schedule letter matches the subject matter. So for Schedule L, for example, that is the land use designation maps. And I suspect that that is going to be one of the most popular schedules that people will be referencing with the OCP. All of the map schedules are organized starting with the regional maps, followed by the local area plans. The one exception to this rule is Schedule U, which is the DPAs. And the DPAs are dealt with at the regional level only, and so you will not find the DPAs in the local area plan. So when you're reading through the table of contents, and even as you're reading the text and you come across a map name, then the way that you want to read through it is the first letter, L, is the schedule letter, followed by the map series. This is Schedule L, Map Series 1, followed by a brief description of this map, Land Use Designations Index, and its regional. Within this map series 1 for regional, we have 8 greater scaled maps to show increased clarity at the parcel level. Following the regional, then we start into the local area plans, beginning with local area plan A. So L is Schedule L, A, local area plan A, map series 1, land use designation index. With the local area plan A, we see that we have 3 maps at increased scales, and followed by local area plan B. So we'll use the Mill Bay area to illustrate how the land use designations at the regional scale become more granular with the sub-designations of the local area plans. So here we see a map at the regional scale, and as we zoom into our example in the Mill Bay, then you can notice that the residential designation is highlighted in light yellow. As we go from the regional to the local area plan, then what you'll notice is that that one regional residential designation is now divided up into 8 sub-designations. Covering the same area, but with greater granularity and division of context at the local area plan. And so from a regional to the local area plan context, that gives you an idea of how you can move around the schedules and to and from the text, and find out where in the world the text is appropriate. And so one of the things that that we started working on is moving to the future. And one of the things, the frameworks or the concepts that is going to help us move from where we are to the modernization is the concept of the transect. And so one of the things, let me get out of here. The transect is a concept model of how policy, or the OCP, and the regulation, the zoning, interact in the real world. And so, like I said, the transect is a concept model that guides us, but it's not prescriptive. So we asked ourselves, how does the CVRD align with the transect model? And so we started with the GIS, and we looked at how the OCP and the zoning relate to each other and the real world by overlaying them. And does Coralie have any additional information or comments on the transect concept?
We've been working with Modus Consulting on the transect, and it's forming the basis of what we're calling the map fabric for the MOCP and the zoning bylaw at the moment. And we're just going to advance to some slides to show you the technical analysis that's gone into creating this fabric that's forming the basis of the MOCP and the MZB.
Thank you, Coralie. Yeah, so what we found is a maze of relationships from the regional OCP to the local area plans and down to the zoning. And as an example, the analysis of the regional agricultural OCP designation shows relationships with 10 local area plan sub-designations and 52 zones, which include residential, commercial, and institutional. So in effect, these relationships form the CVRD land use DNA. And the next 3 slides illustrate some of our current DNA in chart format. And I'll just let you know that it's not expected that you're going to actually be able to read this these next couple slides. This slide represents the regional agriculture designation, and with GIS what we did is we overlaid the regional, the local area sub-designations with the zoning, and just to see what our fabric, what does it look like on the ground. And without spending too much time looking at it, you could see that it's not quite as orderly as the transect concept model is at this time. However, the modernization is expected to tighten this up a little bit. So this is agriculture. This is what we found with commercial. Again, the top one is the regional designation. The middle line is the sub-designations at the local area plans. And the bottom line is the appropriate zones that intersect those OCP designations and sub-designations. Probably the most complex is the residential. Residential across the CVRD, it's quite a maze, and that is where we're starting. And what the modernization will do is we'll try to reorganize and restructure the land use. So from this slide, we'll just zoom in a little bit to show a little bit more of the concept around how we're planning to move the process along and the framework from where we are to the modernization. So here's an example where we have a regional designation of residential, and for this local plan we have 6 sub-designations that interact with it, and underneath the sub-designations at the local area plan, then we have the associated zones appropriate with them. And so with the harmonization, Coralie's team created the residential regional designation. Some of the local plans had some sub-designations like comprehensive development that weren't quite appropriate for the OCP, so they've removed those or realigned them. And so that was the first step. And the next step is in the modernization, we'll get rid of the regional concept of the regional designation, and we'll create a few more regional designations, but far fewer sub-designations or no sub-designations at all. And so we're revamping that as we move along. With the new framework, we will be looking at simplifying the relationships from OCP policy to zoning regulations. And so what some of the concepts will be is that we will have the OCP designations. In this case, in this example, it's the residential. And then we'll have a spectrum of zones that are appropriate for the residential. And moving from left to right, generally speaking, we will start with lower density, moving to higher density, larger parcels to smaller parcels, low number of units per area, high number of units per area, low population, high population. And that follows along with the transept concept. And part of the concept there is moving from the rural to the urban. And so if we look at what the possibilities are for modernized organization, then this is where we're looking to go to. So we have 4 OCP designations for residential, and we have far fewer zones associated to them. But they're also organized in a fashion, again, scaling from left to right, from very rural to the higher density of the village residential. And so the transect model will help guide that, that revamping, and hopefully it will help the decision making as to what and where appropriate land use is going to fit within our context of the CVRD.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Allison Garnett is online, and she drafted bylaw 4330, the zoning consistency bylaw. Welcome, Allison, and she's just got a few slides to share with you to explain this bylaw.
Thanks, Carly. Glad to be with you guys this evening. So Rob, if you could, yeah, thank you so much. So the big question is, what is CVRD bylaw number 4330? So I'll just provide a quick explanation. It's attachment C in your agenda package associated with this staff report. And it's an amendment bylaw to several of the electoral area zoning bylaws. And it's really designed to create consistency between the zoning bylaws and the OCP bylaw 4270. Next slide, please. The primary purpose of it is to remove regulatory content from the OCP and to implement it into the zoning bylaw. And what we're doing there is we're really removing redundancy and streamlining the OCP. Bylaw 4330, it does not apply to all of the electoral area zoning bylaws. It only applies to A and C, B, E, F, and H, and it does not apply to areas D, G, or I zoning bylaws. So a quick description of the process that we followed in drafting this bylaw. We reviewed the local area plans and the official community plans, and primarily looking for regulatory content that could be implemented right away into the zoning bylaws. And all the changes were tracked in a spreadsheet per electoral area. The zoning bylaw amendments in the bylaw are hard to understand. They're quite cryptic, the way they're written. So attachment C1 is an explanatory bylaw. And so the idea there is to list the wording taken straight from the bylaw, an explanation of that, and then the rationale for it. And I'll take you through an example so that you can understand, make sure you understand what's being proposed. So for this example from Cobble Hill, the South Cowichan OCP says, there's some keywords here. It says the implementing zoning bylaw will allow for a home occupation on a parcel within the CR designation. We know that the CR designation applies to Arbutus Ridge, and we know that looking at the South Cowichan zoning bylaw, that this has not yet been implemented. So bylaw 4330 proposes to amend the South Cowichan zoning bylaw to put that policy into action, and then we don't need to have that redundant policy. Next slide, please. So this is what the explanatory table looks like. The column on the left, proposed amendment, has the wording straight from the bylaw, which doesn't really mean a lot. It's not there without the context. The middle column summarizes what the amendment is doing. So we're adding something to the CD1 zone, which applies to Arbutus Ridge. We're adding home occupation as a permitted use. And the rationale is to implement OCP policy. And this is example just demonstrates the purpose of bylaw 4330 is really to implement the policy into regulation and streamline the OCP bylaw. Thank you very much. Back to you, Coralie.
Thank you. So next steps for today, October 21st, and the staff report are consideration for first and second reading. That's the staff recommendation for bylaws 4270, the OCP for the electoral areas, bylaw 4329, the bylaw revision bylaw, and that's moving content from the DP guidelines into the zoning bylaw, the modernized zoning bylaw, and bylaw 4330, the zoning consistency bylaw, which Allison has just given you a brief overview on. Should first and second reading, or when first and second reading is given to bylaw 4270, 4329, and 4330, it must, under the Act, be considered with the financial plan and any waste management plan, such as liquid waste management plan. It must be considered in conjunction with other relevant planning and policies. Staff is also recommending direction for agency referrals. When first and second reading is given and agency referrals are directed, that will happen, and staff would come back with any recommended amendments to the OCP, any of the schedules before, and the directors have an additional opportunity to debate the content before these bylaws go to public hearing. Bylaw 4329 does not have to go to public hearing. And after that, at some point, then there's third and final readings. So before we take any questions or comments today, we'd like to share with you this video in which we interviewed the directors and asked for their comments on the harmonization and the modernization.
I have lived here most of my life. It's been a place for my children, to raise my children, and to live here and have my family here. It's been a wonderful place. And ever since that time, I felt that I always needed to give back, because I've been very blessed to be able to live here. So it's a place that we need to look after.
The CVRD is an interesting area in terms of its diversity. As for the future, it's going to face challenges just like anywhere else, with concerns about environment, concerns about the economy, and concerns about where people are going to live in the future as our population grows.
Things have changed. There's more roads, there's more traffic on the roads, there's more people moving in. We can't not change things. We have to move with the times. And this to me is what we're doing. We're saying, okay, we realize that there are problems with the plans now that weren't apparent 30 years ago.
You know, when we look to the future, it's so important to think about why we're living here now and what we love about it, and then to protect that and build on it. If we can get it right, livability for the people that are here, I think the future will be strong.
So there's this question of, where are we going to accommodate 5,000 more people in the next few decades in the regional district, in the electoral areas?
As a community, we've given that a lot of thought. There's a lot of change that's anticipated in our region over the next 5, 10, 15 years. But at a local level, right here, right now, I think we are very concerned with development, and we are trying to focus on thoughtful development.
We can build houses and accommodation, but unless we have the infrastructure in place, such as the sewer, the water, the roads, really we're tying ourselves in knots.
The aquifers here are stressed, and there's a question how much more development we can take. And we already have over 1,500 lots actually zoned and approved that aren't built on yet. So it's an open question whether we really should, whether we can provide water.
Part of this process is to hear from the community about What infrastructure do we need in place to accommodate those people? Where is the best place from a planning perspective, from an infrastructure, sewer, water, recreation? Where is the best place for those people to be absorbed into our community?
An additional 5,000 people is not really a problem. The number looks big. Like, yes, if you add 5,000, let's say, to Yubo or to even Lake Cowichan, yeah, that'd be a big deal. But 5,000 over the whole region, that's not a large number. What we need here, and I've been advocating that for a long time, is we need young people to come here. How do we concentrate on that? Well, there is a problem with housing, definitely. We should encourage lower cost housing for these younger people, younger families, because many of them can't afford the average home of $500 and some odd thousand, and it's a lot of money.
Work is changing. More people are working from home with technology. So there will be more people working at home in the Cowichan Valley. We need to make sure that the technology is there for them to utilize, for them to be able to work from home.
I would love to see something like that happen here. I know my husband works from home. It's not rare. People do work from home. They commute now and then, and that is why we're able to live in a rural place. Otherwise, the economics doesn't support certain types of positions on the island.
We have to look to diversify our economy, and we don't want to diversify with the lowest paid jobs. We want to diversify with good paying, family sustaining jobs.
Government can facilitate. Government can work with business and the people in order to create the jobs that are needed and desired and grow that economy.
We also have to adapt to climate change, to the changing climate. Wildfire risks are growing, and as I mentioned before, summertime drought and low water flows in the rivers is a real serious concern.
I'm speaking to a lot of farmers, and the climate change here has drastically increased their ability not to be able to farm at certain times. Like they were saying that their fathers were able to do, in June they would plant this, and July they would do this, and they were harvesting. Now it's all over the map.
Well, I think that the expertise of the staff and consultants will help us move forward with adaptation and mitigation. The data that has been collected will definitely assist us in our areas to move forward.
So there's lots of things to be concerned about, but it's not anything we can't manage if we start thinking about it and planning for it.
With this harmonization and modernization, that will give us vision far more than we've had in the last 11 years that I've been area director. So I think it's very valuable.
And I think that's what we're hoping with this OCP review, the official community plan review, that we'll just hear from as many people as possible.
We're looking for those diverse opinions so that those people who are passionate about our community can come together and share ideas, and share those ideas with the staff and the elected officials who will help to shape what our community will look like in the generations to come. So before we can go to questions, I'm going to need you to lower your presentation so I can see the rest of the committee. Okay, I've got Director Wilson, Yanni Donardo. I'll put myself in there somewhere. Anyone else? Smith. Okay, Director Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that. That was really good, Carly. You've done a huge amount of work, and I know that for the last year or more, you've been nose to the grindstone all the time. So thank you very much, you and your staff, for the hard work there. Just a quick question on Arbutus Ridge, which is to a certain extent quite a unique place. And you mentioned that they would have to be brought in to designate it as single family homes. One of the things that comes to mind here is that they are very large homes out there, and they're only two people living in most of them. If and it's also governed by their strata rules. If the strata decided in the future to say, okay, we've got the space, it's unlikely. There you go. It's unlikely that will change. But let's say the strata said, look, we've got all this empty space here. If people want to, they can make it into two family homes, if you like. What would be the situation then? How would they would then have to come to the board and ask for a change in designation in that particular case?
Coralie?
I think as part of the review process, we'll have that consultation period. So there'll be an opportunity during that review process to look at that. And then we'll go from there. But after the zoning bylaw, the modernized zoning bylaw, and the modernized OCP are adopted, and there wanted to be changes beyond that, then yes, that would be the process.
Director Yanni Donardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Coralie. Thank you, Coralie, Allison, and Rob. Great work. I'm really impressed, and I'm so excited about this because it's something in this term that we really wanted to see move along, and happy to see it working so well. And I noticed that Rob had mentioned that 350 maps. That's amazing. But the only one question I did have was waste management. Is the waste management only liquid, or is it our garbage, our table scraps? Is any of that in our OCP?
Yes, it is in the OCP. There are we have a policy section 4 on water, liquid waste, solid waste.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Smith.
Thank you through the chair to staff. That was an amazing presentation. I think that the amount of reading that we've gone through, I know I've gone through many versions with you as staff, and every time I read it, it seems like it's fresh and new, and there's new wording or changes, and the amount of effort that's gone into that and time is just beyond. Some of the things that I have a little bit of, and I need to get a bit of clarification, is if one of us has something that's unique in our area, and it falls in the local plan, or somehow if it's fallen into that MOCP in that zoning transect situation. Like, I just want to make sure that if any of us have any unique parcels that don't really fall under a lot of that somehow it's not shoved into something that may not be what the community had in mind. Can you just make sure I've got that one clear?
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, that is correct. And in fact, as we are cutting what we're calling the fabric right now for the zoning bylaw and the OCP, the initial GIS maps, we're also identifying the outliers, and we're creating a list of those. And then the question will be, how will they be incorporated? And there may be those situations where there has to be zones that are particular for those unique situations. We don't know yet how extensive that is, but certainly we're identifying them already, the outliers, the anomalies that don't fit into the overall fabric schematic in a really, clear, logical fashion. So that work is happening right now. And there will be a lot of opportunity for the communities to review that and ask questions with staff along the way over the next year to 18 months. Rob, do you want to speak more to that, or?
No, I think that covers it off. And I will mention that even the concept model of the transect identifies that there are special cases that will fit pretty much anywhere in the model. So that's one of the things that will be looked at for sure.
Follow up.
One of the other questions that I have is in regards to water. I did read through, I can't remember which document it was, and I did note that there was an indication that in Saltaire, the water is reaching a limit for development. So how will we make sure that that's noted as we move along for that? I know other areas have water issues, so I just thought I'd give my example. But you know, that would be something as we move through all of this. How do we make sure that we can support something, or if a designation changes or something's added, it is before it's added, is it considered the water availability and sustainability in that?
Curly?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, absolutely. And if you can think of or the analogy that Rob and I talk about is peeling an onion, that when we're looking at where should housing be considered for the future, certainly one of the parameters is water availability, hazard areas. And as we start peeling away and taking away the things that we have to consider, we are left with where we can consider growing in the future. And also where we will be coming back to as staff and saying to the directors, okay, so given these parameters, and for example, a lack of water capacity here, should we be looking at downzoning? Those types of questions will be coming forward to you. And you'll see going into 2021 discussion papers and policy papers coming forward for the directors to have that kind of discussion and give direction to staff on matters such as that. But certainly water is number one, along with hazards. Rob, do you want to add to that, or?
Okay, so I've got myself next, then Blaze, and then Lori again. And I appreciate everybody's been really patient. We've gone through a lot of material today, and I'm feeling it. But I guess I actually kind of wish I would have seen the presentation before I went and read all the material that I read on the weekend. I would have preferred to do it in that order, because I actually have a fair number of questions that I don't really want to pose right now. And I'm kind of go back to what Klaus said at the beginning of the presentation. Like, I'm not comfortable right now saying, we've got 1 through 5, let's just move these and go on to the next step. I have a sense that I'd like to, now with the backdrop, you were using fabric as an example, but now that we have the skeleton of the structure together and I've seen how you've packaged that, I want to go back in and reread a lot of the material that we have, because I've noticed anomalies in some of what's been produced. So I turn to the directors and say, I'm uncomfortable making any recommendation that we move forward and move this to the board now. I don't know what the rest of you are thinking. I'd like to have an opportunity to go back, reread this package that you presented to us, and then have another opportunity to, in an open session, have a little bit more discussion and get into some of the finer detail, maybe when we're a little fresher. So I see some people nodding about that. Is that going to cause difficulties as far as rolling this out in timelines? If we were to say we scheduled a special meeting for 10 o'clock in the morning before a regular EASC meeting, so that we could just have a one-topic discussion and get into some of those finer detail questions that we may have around this. So Coralie, any thoughts on timing?
Through the chair, not at all. Staff want the directors to be really comfortable with the material. That's really important. And as you can see from the slides that we've shown you today, Rob's slides, we're busy on the thinking and the development of the foundations for the MOCP and the MZB. So if, you know, take your time to feel comfortable. And I also encourage any one of you to contact me directly, which many of you have, with questions or comments. And Klaus called me just before the meeting with a couple of items that we were able to quickly sort out. So those types of things, feel free to call, and we can, in most cases, respond fairly quickly. And then other things that apply to everyone, generally we can have that session. So we encourage that. We really want you to feel comfortable with the bylaws.
So just as a follow-up on timing, and I look to all of you because we've got a whole bunch of budget stuff coming up, you know, in the next couple of months. Could we find the time in our calendar on a regular Wednesday to come in early and do this, and then maybe put forward these recommendations for an upcoming board meeting? Because right now I'm in a bit of a fog and wouldn't feel that it would be best practice to do that. I see nodding from a couple of you. Any other thoughts on that front? And I've still got Blaze and Lori to go to. So tell you what, chew on that one. We'll hear from the next two, and then we'll figure out what we want to do. Go ahead, Blaze.
Yeah, thank you. So, Coralie, I've asked about this before, but the Malahat Drive and protections for the scenery and the buffer, or however we want to address that, is that going to be, I don't know what to say, but is it an outlier, or is that a designation that we're looking at?
No, through the chair, thank you to Director Salmon. We do have a view corridor DP on the list for the modernization. So it's there. I have been talking to our lawyers about how to do that specifically because there would be involve some zoning bylaw, amendments as part of the modernized zoning bylaw as well. And also Rob and I have been chatting because it's going to require some mapping, some extensive mapping. So that's on their list in GIS as well. So it is part of the process going forward. Yes.
Oh, okay. So a view corridor DP, basically.
A DP along with some zoning bylaw amendments. So it will require GIS to map those corridors as part of the process.
Great, thank you.
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that with regards to making a decision today, I think that it's probably a good idea to go away and digest this and then come back again. But I wanted to give a shout out to all of the directors that they did such a good job in the presentation. But most importantly to the videographer, I'd like to say that it was very well done in every way. It's really engaging, and the direction that he goes in. So I just appreciate that the way it's been handled and how it's turned out. Thank you.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Coralie and your team. I am super excited to get on with modernization. And I'm really confident in the work that you've done. You guys have worked so hard, and it's been so thorough, and I'm just so amazed at this whole project. And so I just like to get on with the modernization now, because that's from where my perspective, that's where the rubber really hits the road on land use. My question is about the public input. So it'll have been quite a long, so now the process is, once we're comfortable and we move to first and second readings, then it would have to go to referrals and then revisions and so forth, and then eventually to a public hearing. But so that will have been how many months since we went to the community with those open houses? Probably well over a year at that point. And I am wondering what kind of plans you have for sort of continuing to involve the public, to keep them fresh and involved, and setting it up for more modernization input at the same time, because I think just going into a public hearing cold next spring without some sort of a information session is going to be very challenging for people. So your thoughts?
Coralie?
Thank you, and through the chair. It will be, could potentially be February, March, or April, depending on when first and second readings are given and staff come back, and depending on the extent of the external agency referral comments as well. So it could be 15 months before going to public hearing. And if the directors wanted to direct staff to have an information session, by all means, we could do that with COVID considerations. We do have the website on community planning is updated regularly with the bylaws. All the videos that you saw today are there. There's information updates, and there's a place for the public to join for information updates on PlaceSpeak. So that's been available for some time, and we do have people subscribing to that. So we look to the directors for direction on a information session that's COVID friendly. That's the direction.
Thank you, Director Acton. Director Acton.
Sorry, I've lost my question now. This is I'm with everyone else with getting a little tired, so I would support another day of doing it, even if it's just 2 weeks from now. That would be great. Oh, I know what my question was. Sorry. I guess. Is there value in, or I guess, the work that the APCs ever did, or the work that the APCs did, was there ever a closed loop with what they had advised you on?
Really?
Through the chair, I have a document. It's probably about 60 pages long, where I've documented all the APC comments and how staff responded to them. And that, the version for each electoral area was shared with the APC chairs. My understanding was shared with the APC. So there is that documentation of the comments that were provided and the changes that staff made as a result. Within the draft bylaw 4270, also several of the APCs provided comments for the modernization. So there's been a list that's been kept of those specifics. And some of those are actually included in draft bylaw 4270. There's a section in there on modernization. So there is that documentation, and the closing of the loop was sending that to the respective APCs.
Okay, thank you for that.
So I'm last on the list, and I too want to thank staff for all the work that's gone into this. I have to concur with Director Nicholson in that that's too big of a gap for us to not have another, as close to an open house presentation to as many members of the public that the COVID safety regulations will allow. I don't think we can just rely on the online version of consultation and engagement. So I think we have to set our minds to that. But in trying to wrap up here, I look to the committee.
can we schedule a special meeting to, you know, put meat on the bones, so to speak, before our next Electoral Area Services Committee, so that we can then make the recommendations through to the board, so that we can get on this? Does that make sense? Okay, I got Lori, you put your hand up there.
Yeah, that just makes sense. I just hope that somebody feeds Klaus.
So, Kathleen, do we need a resolution that says that we recommend to the board that a special EASC prior to our, what do you recommend, Kathleen?
You don't need a recommendation to the board. You just need to pass a recommendation within the committee to hold a special meeting.
Does somebody want to move that a special meeting be held in advance of the next EASC? Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that?
After 10 a.m.
After, okay, 10 a.m.
I'm booked.
Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's get to this as quickly as we can. Good work, Rob. Good work to all your team. Great job. Allison, we don't get to see her much around here anymore. Say hi to her for us if she's still online. And also, we're not quite done yet. We have the no new business. We're down to question period. Ms. Harrison, is there any questions from the public for the director or for the chair today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is one submission, and it reads, Mr. Chair, why is there still several supplemental items being added to the agenda at last minute? It was obvious that the public and some directors hadn't even seen the material. Did the CVRD not have a standard operating procedure not to entertain new business items unless they have given the public and the directors time to study them? Thanks to the directors who referred these items. Cliff Evans.
So the short answer to that is we have a policy in place, but the advent of virtual meetings and the somewhat instantaneous access, it's been a challenge, and I understand that the chair has asked staff to look at, and I believe Ms. Legault is looking at some refinement and some earlier deadlines so that we are not in that position in the future. So it'll be a board policy that will, of course, have effect on all the standing committees as well. So yes, it's been a challenge, and yes, we're looking at addressing it. Is that the final submission?
It is, Mr. Chair.
And we have no closed session?
There is none, Mr. Chair.
Does anybody want to end the meeting? Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Smith. All those in favor? Any opposed? Good night, everyone.